you for inviting MG on this coveted occasion. MG is a pretty young company. We are just 3 years old. And when we decided to come to India, that rough time, the whole thing was how we are going to disrupt the things, how we are going to do the things in a different way. And then how do we really take care of all the stakeholders? So as part of our brand building, we realized that community is a very important part of stakeholders, and community needs to be included as stakeholder. So even before we launched the car, MG Hector, the first car, much before that, we started talking about what can we do in the nearby communities where we operate. So we have two big places. One is in Gurgaon, where our head office is, and second is in Baroda, Halol, where our plant is. So we started working and with some NGOs and some organizations, and we took the cause of women empowerment, girl child education, and lots of other initiatives in that area. I'm happy to say that we have helped more than 60,000 girls in their education already. Part of our car revenue goes into their education, and we have been able to generate a good amount of money for that cause, and we are doing more and more. So in that respect, when we got this opportunity to associate with Akshara to further this cause, we thought it's a great platform to be associated with because we have a common, some common value system. So once again, thank you very much. We are happy to be part of this initiative and wish this event a great success.
Hello everyone, Namaskara. That was a short video from MG Motors, our main sponsor for today's event. We have been conducting this annual Math Symposium as a physical event in Bangalore around the National Mathematics Day to commemorate the birth anniversary of math genius Srinivas Ramanujan. We call this It All Adds Up. This year, the pandemic has actually forced us to host this as a webinar. So the online version of this Math Symposium is something that we are enjoying delivering it to you. Well, the advantage of hosting this online is that we have a larger reach outside Bangalore. In fact, we are live all over the world right now. So good morning to all those in North America. Good afternoon to those in Europe, and very good evening to all of you in India. So thanks for taking time to join us today. I'm sure you're going to enjoy today's various discussion, the panel discussions, the keynote address, and various other discussions. So next couple of hours, we have a variety of exciting discussions lined up. Today's all the event is recorded in YouTube on Akshara channel. You can access it anytime in the future. Here, without further ado, let's begin our first panel discussion. Shri Ashok Kamath, Chairman of Akshara Foundation, will moderate the first panel discussion. Ashok has been with Akshara since 2003. Over to you, Ashok.
Thank you, Nagaraj. And once again, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, as the case may be. Our first panel today is on digital technologies in the Indian context. And I think it's a very relevant topic at this point when during the pandemic, many of our children have not had any education whatsoever over the last several months. So what do we mean by the Indian context? India is home to several unicorns in the edtech sector. But if you look at what they serve, if you look at the websites of the top 5 unicorns in the edtech sector, they serve about a little under 3 million subscribers. But they have what they call 112 million users. 3 million subscribers are obviously what is the paid subscribers. And that in the context of children who are in the 5 to 19 age group, we have 352 million children. And if you extend that to 20 to up to the age of 24, we have an additional 90 million children. So if you look at 3 million in the context of even 350 million, it's only about 1% of children who are getting the full benefit of education using digital. So what do we do about a large unserved population that's there, that's not getting access to digital technologies? And this is, I think, a cause for us to pause and think of innovations that will bring access to digital access to education to the last. So something that we would like to champion that we call, giving every child her rights to digital education. We have three people on this panel today. As we speak, I will introduce them one by one. Our first panelist is Namita Dalmia. Namita is currently a director of investments at the Omidyar Network India. She's extremely well placed to talk about this topic. She has a dual degree in electrical engineering from the Indian Institute of Technology in Bombay. And then she went on to do a degree in business from Stanford University, and has had many stints in tech companies, of course, but also when she came back and joined the education space, she spent some time at the Central Square Foundation before moving to Omidyar Network India. She's on the board of some of these edtech, superstars, Vedantu, White Hat Junior, and Senta. So she has an insider's view of this issue as well. So welcome, Namita, to this panel. Our second guest, our panelist, is Shankar Maruwada. Shankar is the co-founder and CEO at EkStep. For those in education, I think EkStep is not an unknown word. They have spent enormous effort in creating the MHRD Diksha platform, which anyone in education today is very familiar with. Shankar himself has an engineering degree from the Indian Institute of Technology in Kharagpur, followed it up with a degree in business from IIM Ahmedabad, and has been an innovator and serial entrepreneur. He's worked in many areas. He's worked at the UID AI, the Unique Identity Authority of India. And he's now trying to bring in a big way the benefits of technology to this field of education. Our third panelist, Sanjeev Malhotra, is the CEO of the Center of Excellence for IoT and Artificial Intelligence at Nasscom. His role at Nasscom today is to be able to digitally transform at the ground level with the largest platform for open innovation to build solutions for real world problems. So Sanjeev has a master's degree from the Oregon State University, followed by a business degree from Duke, and has been working with companies like Intel and Qualcomm before coming into Nasscom. Sanjeev, welcome to this panel.
Thank you.
So as you can see, we have people, three smart brains who are very well clued into this business of technology and how we can put this to good use. When you talk platforms, I think it is essential for us to understand that a good platform that serves population scale, you should be able to unbundle microservices. You should be able to make the system configurable, observable, so that we know who's using and what's happening. Of course, it has to be scalable, resilient, should have the adequate levels of privacy and security. It should be unified. So I think these are some of the characteristics of a good system. The buzzword now is societal platform, which was championed out of the group that started EkStep. So let me begin by asking Shankar the first question, which is if you need populations platforms at population scale, Diksha is one that you've created. How can we ensure that a platform like Diksha serves the needs of all its stakeholders, children, teachers? There are content providers like us who, would like to see, what's happening and how we can improve our content on a constant basis. You don't want to be static. Also educators, decision makers. So there's a wide variety of people. So how has Diksha addressed this problem? What do we have today and what do we expect to see in the next few months?
Thank you, Ashok, for having me on the panel. A pleasure and honor to be part of this annual gathering of Akshara Foundation, an organization that I really admire for all the wonderful work you've been doing. I'll spend a minute talking about Diksha for many people who don't know it. Diksha is a platform of the Government of India. In fact, it's the National Platform for School Education. Started around 3 years ago as a public-private partnership between Government of India, a few philanthropists, and my good friend Namita. We kind of laid the groundwork for this together while she was at Central Square Foundation, including being part of the government committee to name it Diksha, if I remember correctly. So from those days that look quite ancient, but it's not even 3 years, the growth of Diksha has been stunning. To give you the latest figures, 2 billion plus learning sessions since April. 16 billion plus, and this is the billion with a B of the scale of India. 16 billion plus minutes of learning across 30 plus languages. The reach of 7 million plus teachers and 180 million plus students across the country. Just one program out of that, Nishtha, which is the NCERT's national training program, since its start in October, has trained close to 3 million teachers, over 18 modules of training, at 1/20th the regular cost of the program if they had done it in the usual physical manner that they did last year, and at 4 times the speed. So this is just to give you a sense of what a 3-year-old baby, a toddler, can do in India. Now, going back to your question, Ashok, 3 things I think are critical. 1, the intent. 2, the design of the platform. And the 3rd, how we connect, collaborate, and co-create. I'll elaborate. In India, we are lucky to have policies that are very, very robust and also very recent. The National Education Policy, August 2020. The Prime Minister's eVidya program launched in May 2020. And these 2 talk about access, equity, affordability, accountability, and quality. And it is, as a question you posed, it has to reach each and every stakeholder and serve each and every stakeholder. So there is a national intent to reach every stakeholder, but intent is not enough. The second part is design. And here a critical thing is to design for the scale of India, for the diversity of India, for the complexity of India right at the beginning. And scale should not be an afterthought. So to do that, that's when EkStep Foundation stepped in. We were set up in 2015 with our own mission impossible of reaching 200 million children by end of 2020, which will be in a couple of weeks from now. And as we thought of our own intent of 200 million, what we did was design infrastructure as a set of building blocks. And that infrastructure Sunbird is what Diksha uses. So Diksha is not designed as an edtech solution. It's an infrastructure for the whole country. Think of it as a digital highway on which many vehicles can ply. And here, this infrastructure is for many solutions to thrive. And therefore, Sunbird, the open source technology that EkStep built, comprises just 10 learning services, or what we call as building blocks. Things like learning services, collaboration services, content services, etc. But what these building blocks did was, when put on the platform of Diksha, they distributed the ability to solve from the center to the states, from the states to the schools, and to the teachers. And essentially revolving around 3 types of personas. There is a teacher, there is a learner, and there is an administrator. Of course, there are parents also. And 3 scenarios. There's the scenario of learning, there's a scenario of helping learn, and there's a scenario of managing learn. And there are just 2 interactions, the interaction of learning and the interaction of administration of learning, which is very vital at a scale of India. So thinking of the design to solve for many solutions that are around these constructs was very vital. And that's how Diksha has also been designed. But the numbers I told you, as I said, is a start. It's part of the journey. But the way those numbers were achieved was not just by rolling out a technology platform. Diksha was connected to what is already abundant in India. Textbooks, abundance of teachers, the good quality infrastructure we have, the physical infrastructure, if not the digital infrastructure. It was connected to policies like PM Vidya and NEP, as I mentioned, and to programs like Nishtha, which were already there. That connecting also was to existing habits of how do children absorb content? How do teachers get additional, how do they get trained? What are the daily rituals and habits of this entire process? So connecting to the habits, collaboration between center and states, among states, between a lot of philanthropies, not just Central Square and EkStep Foundation. There was a technology created to source content. And I think thousands of teachers have contributed content. Tens of organizations have contributed content, including Akshara Foundation. Collaboration on the ground in terms of implementation, content for special needs children, children with online content, offline content. So a lot of collaboration, co-creation came together. So that's how I would summarize that. To serve the needs of various stakeholders, we need to have the intent to serve them, which we have in India. We need to design to do that. We're on the way to doing that. Most importantly, as a country, not just as government or the private sector, as a country, we must come together to connect what we already have and to collaborate and co-create the solutions to serve all the stakeholders. Thank you, Ashwin.
Thanks very much, Shankar. What can we expect from the Diksha platform in terms of upgrades over the next, year or 2?
Well, a lot of that is work in progress. It's the centers are looking, the center is looking at various aspects of it. So, for example, assessments on the Diksha platform. Can you have a child take a quick assessment connected to learning outcomes? Gujarat is doing a very interesting experiment where they are having the children take assessments on pen and paper. Those are entered into a pen and paper mark sheet, but digitized using artificial intelligence. So the records of some 30 lakh children is now available in pretty much the next day. Then you have quizzes that are being conducted, quizzes to engage children. Teacher training courses which are already there, but the idea of courses to include a chapter as a course. So as I said, There's a lot of imagination that's happening, brainstorming that's happening by policymakers, by philanthropists, by a whole consortium of people who are coming together to see how we can make our existing programs better and how we can implement our policies. The National Mission on Foundational Literacy is about to be launched. How can this help that? Right. So, in fact, and maybe I'll come back to it later, a lot of countries in Africa are now inspired and they want to take Diksha, or rather the technology and the experience of Diksha, to their countries.
All right, so let's move on, and I'm sure there'll be some discussions around, there's so much to discuss here. Namita, there is a role for philanthropic and patient capital in the development of this EdTech ecosystem. What are your views on it?
No, just like Shankar, I'm also very delighted to be here. So thanks for having me, Ashok. And of course, there is a role for philanthropist and impact investment ecosystem, and there's a lot of ways we can play a supportive role. You did mention that as a dual checkbook writer, we have in our portfolio for-profit education companies and innovations that we seeded or invested in, and they have in the COVID times accelerated their growth, but also kind of limited to reaching out to a certain segment of population. At the same time, I also want to highlight that organizations like yourselves, who've also been partners of ON India as well as Teach for India or Dream a Dream, we've seen all of you leverage technology really well and really accelerate the learning for children. Teach for India is doing blended learning. All its 900 fellows are really just doing blended learning, teaching from home, students being at home and leveraging technology, many different types of technology, whether it's not just a Zoom class, but also classroom management, etc. And there are a lot of new experiments that are happening, which was not happening before. Dream a Dream has been working with several state governments and been using YouTube, WhatsApp, to disseminate its SEL, socio-emotional learning content, which is as important as any academic content. And you've been thinking about doing a shared digital device model, really, and start bridging the divide. So now coming to your question, in terms of the role that we can play, really, I think about that in 4 different ways. One, really funding innovation to test new things, really taking that risk in terms of of supporting digital education for all, including testing innovations like what is that shared digital device model that looks like given the digital divide, right? What does it look like to take an offline program completely online, but making it accessible to all children, whether it is using technologies like WhatsApp or Diksha, really kind of to take some of those innovation at scale. But I still put it in the bucket of funding innovation because philanthropic capital is limited, but they come at the right point of catalyzing innovation, and then really look at partnerships like with government to scale those up. So that's the first bucket. The second one, which I think is happening to a certain extent, is funding networks. I think there is, if anything, COVID has taught us is there is a lot more that can be achieved by collaborating and working more cohesively. Diksha also provides that model to work more collaboratively, and every organization, every technology kind of played its role. Some kinds of networks I've been thinking about, again, to bridge this digital divide and making digital education accessible to all, is how do we think about network of people, different people bringing in ideas around devices, content, training, other innovations together, and philanthropy or impact investment can really help can ensure or enable networks. And we are doing that in a separate context, but I see there is a role that funders can play in terms of funding networks of people. the other network that comes to mind is how do you bring for-profit and non-profit world together, right? So there is a certain kind of innovation that has happened in the for-profit world, but can really impact investment, or can it really bring the two worlds together and forge more partnerships? Of course, there is any collaboration comes with certain costs of coordination, and so we don't want to do that, but really thinking about funding networks. The third role that we can play is really forging and strengthening partnership with government. So being that convener to bring people together and putting ideas together, like whether it's in the open digital ecosystem, like what we did in case of Diksha, and several other things, several other digital infrastructure that can be created in partnership with the government. So we can play a role there. I also been thinking about and would love to hear other people's perspective on, just like textbooks have been kind of public goods, is there a time for internet and devices to become public good? And if that public good is to be provisioned by government, what is the role? How do we come together, and can philanthropists play a role in making that more accessible? And the fourth thing, really, I think not very important, is in what I call research and ecosystem building, right? So really, whether research means doing more evidence collection, doing more landscaping and understanding the users and their needs more. And if that public good is to be provisioned by government, what is the role? How do we come together, and can philanthropists play a role in making that more accessible? And the fourth thing, really, I think there's some audio trouble, and I could hear myself. And so just to complete this point, I think the other role we can play is to highlight and amplify good stories and making public aware about what's happening. So yeah, I think there is a big role that impact investors and philanthropists can play, and I'm happy to learn more in terms of where we can contribute.
That's awesome. In later sessions today, we will hear about spreading all the good news stories, to everyone. We've been having a challenge putting this webinar together because we have speakers from around the world. Namita herself right now is in Basel, Switzerland. And then we have speakers in the US. So please forgive us if people are just kind of wandering in and out a little bit to test themselves. Sanjeev, at Nasscom, I think personally, I think there's a role that an industry body like Nasscom could play. What is your view in terms of how does Nasscom configure itself, if you will, to help the cause of education of India's masses?
Thank you, Ashok. And again, so delighted to be here and impressed by the work that is being done by the foundation, Akshara. And, at Nasscom, I represent the Center of Excellence part of it, where we deal more with the digital innovations. And the talent has been a pretty big piece for Nasscom. And if you see the success of IT industry, the centerpieces for the success of IT industry has been the talent pool that we have in India. So what you do plays right into that creation of a talent pool, which is right at the heart of it. And I can see that, I can see our incoming chairman, Rekha Menon, being here, who can articulate some of these points better than I can, on how much importance has been given to it at Nasscom, on the talent side. Now, I'll tell you one interesting thing, why what you're seeing is so important before I get into some of the things that we do and can do. Is, there are a lot of courses and at Nasscom, of course, we have a program called Future Skills, which is meant for people, as a continuous learning platform for them to get them skilled at any stage of life. And of course, some of them are at a corporate level and some of them are for the masses given out free as well. Now, talking to some people, in the sector who have been trying to say, okay, let's train people, who are graduated from there and who are graduated from here, and we find they're not up to the mark. Maybe we'll give them some courses, to get them to a certain level. But some people said, you cannot make up for 12 years of lack of education in 1 year or 2 years, I mean, if you don't have a proper education in first 12 years of your life or the schooling time, you cannot just say in 2 years, I will come and just give you crash course and cover everything for you. That ain't not going to do it. So I think it is very important, to talk about some of the things that you do, and that too at the math level, which is becoming very core at our AI and the digital world that we are getting into. So having said that, we had a pleasure of having the Chief Secretary visit our labs earlier this year, and he had said, Karnataka has a priority. He gave us 2 or 3 priority sectors to focus on the innovations that we can bring out, from the startup world, the work that they are doing. And one of the sectors, apart from being nutrition being one of them, the education was high on the number 1 on his list, and that's when I spent 6 months working with some of the innovative solutions and the startups who are working in this area. One point that came out was, that gamification of these solutions is very important. That we turn this into a fun thing, and a lot of these things have to be. If we can gamify some of these things, we'll see higher adoption and not a coercion or not something that is forced on you. So we have been working with some of the startups in that area who are actually building that task of or building those solutions in that area. Of course, there's no one thing that will cover the entire space. And that's where we have been kind of trying to work with a bunch of those people over last 1 year. One thing that we can do, even is to run a sort of what we become good at doing is run some challenges for people to say that, hey, this is the type of area that we want to address. Why don't we get some good ideas and collate those ideas in the form of a challenge? It's like crowdsourcing some good ideas. So that's one thing that we can definitely think about doing. Other thing that we definitely can work is work with some of the startup ecosystem and actually deploy or run some pilots in some of the areas and some of the designated areas that government gave us, and see how effective they are. I mean, there are a lot of solutions. Sometimes sitting in our labs, we do not know which one works, which one doesn't work. Sometimes which I think may not is a great idea actually works out really well in the field. So that's another suggestion I have, is that we can run a few pilots in certain districts, along with the government. So these are the few things that we have been working on, but I can speak more as we go along. So just to get put my thoughts here, from the Nasscom COE side, these are some of the key initiatives.
Thanks, Sanjeev. Couple of quick questions come to mind. One is, in some sense, I think we need to ensure that this loss of 1 year that we are experiencing now should never again happen in our country anymore. I mean, we have to protect, this country and the children from not having to lose. I like to talk usually about saying that if 250 million children were out of school this year, and if you assume a notional $100 loss per child, it works out to $25 billion, which is a significant amount in our context. I mean, so if you look at it that way, you really feel the pain of our children not going to school, right? The issue also is, how do you keep training teachers with online methods? And later on in this event, we are going to release an additional 25-30 hours of programming that we've done for teacher training in 1st to 5th grade math. That would be the next session. But Shankar, I mean, can the Diksha platform be used extensively to train teachers, to excite them? Because it's not just classroom training. It has to be more experiential and all that stuff. Can the Diksha platform be used to figure out how that works, who learns, who does not, how can we help those who cannot?
Yeah, that's a great question. Now, firstly, we must realize the limits of technology. It can never replace a face-to-face interaction and a face-to-face training. But having said that, this year has proven that relying only on that might not be the wisest thing. And fortunately, India was prepared. So as this year's training programs have happened and some world records are being set in terms of the number of teachers being taught, languages, courses, etc., state and central governments are realizing that Diksha is a viable mechanism to hold more and more trainings. So now they are thinking about micro courses because it's in your pocket, right? You can have a 15-minute course on class management or a 2-hour course on class management. So states and the center and even various organizations are thinking about how to create content for micro courses. Why do we call them micro courses? When a teacher goes through a micro course, if it's an hour or two, at the end of it, they, excuse me, they get a digital credential. Now, this digital credential is observable by the system. So therefore, at every point, the system knows which all teachers have completed what all courses at the state level, district level, block level. And the teachers can also proudly show off their credentials. So this is creating new conversations and new capabilities, not just for teachers and the content creators, but also for the system to think as to what next with the Diksha kind of capabilities of data, of micro courses, of credentialing, and a whole lot of other features, including some AI-based assessment tools. So short answer is yes, it is possible. It will take us 2-3 years as a country to figure out how to make the most of it.
Yeah, so, then there is some synergy there, getting Nasscom involved in, because Sanjeev runs the Center for IoT and AI. So we should.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And, the other person on this panel, Namita, is on the board of CENTA, so teacher accreditation. So I think link all of these together, we could have a really powerful system that encourages teachers, that makes them excited, that takes them away from, the boring stuff of the past, to make them, put them into a much, much better space as we look forward to the future.
Absolutely.
Right. I know we are running short of time, but I have just one interesting question that came up, and any one of you can answer this. There is this feeling that in all this technology business, somehow we are losing sight of the disabled. There is no dedicated focus, if you will, about children, of including children with disabilities. How can, the power of technology help in, making sure that they are not excluded from the process of education? Any one of you?
I can add one quick line to it. Maybe, Shankar can say more on that, but I have seen many solutions, which have come up, which are aiding the hearing impaired children, the vision impaired people, who have made things easier for them in terms of reading. It's almost like akin to reading from a book. The newer technologies, as you move your hand on the book, they can actually book and read for you. So we have seen such technologies, in my opinion, can bridge that gap that we are talking about disabled, and that's a very important point. There are many people, who need attention. I just mentioned one or two of them, but it's a large range of disabilities that people suffer.
I believe the number is as high as 13%.
Oh, okay. I didn't know it was that high, but definitely I knew it was on the high side, and it needs attention, and technology definitely answers some of those things. And I can bring out some specifics on that, and share with you some of the good ones that are being adopted across the world. Some solutions I'll be happy to share with you that you can put on your website and other places.
Namita, any thoughts? You're on mute, Namita.
Sorry, I'm saying it is a very, very important topic. And I know this has crossed my mind a couple of times in terms of when you really think about being inclusive. This is a large part of the population which is not being addressed. I know there is some wonderful work happening on the ground. So I think my first step would be to even understand and learn from people who are doing some wonderful work, even if it is in the brick and mortar setting today. And I do think technology can play a lot of part. We have to really think about inclusiveness, inclusive technology. And I'm sure with folks like Shankar and the power of Nasscom behind us, we can always find a technology answer. But it's really important for us to even understand and see what's going on, what's working, what are the challenges, and then answer that question.
Shankar?
Yeah, just to build off the statistics, again, goes back to the three things I talked about. We must have the intent. Thankfully, the policy plays a lot of emphasis. And with 13%, right, it's a lot of children in India. Second is we must design for each of the different class of CWS. There's no one size fits all, right? And it's further compounded when the children with special needs have other economic or social disadvantages. And therefore, the third thing that different groups have to come together, each with their expertise. So the tech folks can bring the tech. The domain folks can understand how, for example, a dyslexic child learns best. What kind of tools and technologies exist for visually impaired children, right? And this is, again, a lot of hard on-the-ground collaboration and co-creation has to happen. Then platforms like Diksha can scale it up, right? So it is, as Namita also alluded to, it's a very, very wicked problem to solve, right? And we, inspired by Ramanujan, the mathematician, who came from humble backgrounds to achieve such great heights, we should look at these 13% as not those who will reach after we reach 87%, right? But we must pay special attention to the next Ramanujan from among these 13%, whether they're male, boy or girl. And that is the kind of energy that as a country we should bring together. Technology is an enabler. It can do a lot, but not without intent, design, and collaboration.
Thank you so much. One of the challenges of doing a webinar like this is you want to impose fatigue on anyone. So you have to keep sessions to be crisp. In a face-to-face math symposium, it all adds up. We would have broken now for a cup of coffee and networking. I want to thank each one of you for taking the time to join us today. Thank you very much, Namita, Shankar, and Sanjeev. And we will close this session. And thank you all for your valuable suggestions and inputs. We will put up a recording of this up on YouTube on the Akshara channel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashok.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks. That was an absorbing session, and I hope we've come up with some interesting solutions that enable us to ensure the digital rights of all children. We have RTE. Can we also now bring in the digital portion in it so that the digital divide is no longer there? For our next session, we have two passionate and dedicated civil servants. I'm delighted to introduce Shri Vijay Bhaskar, the Chief Secretary, Government of Karnataka. Can we have him on screen, please? Still waiting for his office to switch it on.
Yes, he's not yet here, Ashok. Okay,
let me introduce Mr. Anil Swarup while we are waiting for Mr. Vijay Bhaskar. Mr. Anil Swarup retired from the IAS, very, very unfortunate. He should have been there forever. Retired from the IAS after 38 years of dedicated service to the nation. He was trained he has a master's in political science from Allahabad University, and needless to say, has received many accolades and honors throughout his career. I think most notable are his two last postings, one as the Secretary to the Government of India in the coal ministry. And this was especially in the aftermath of the coal scam, which was a very, very troubled period. And following that, he was with the then MHRD as Secretary School Education and Literacy, where he has championed the cause of public-private partnerships to improve the quality of education. I think it would be very apt to say that during his time as the secretary, there were many PPPs that were initiated and scaled up to a large extent. Post-retirement, he's not been idle. He's created something that's really wonderful. It is called the Nexus of Good. And it's this nexus of good that's basically connecting goodness, spreading hope, mercy, wisdom, and kindness through positive action. Essentially, it's a group that's being inspired by Shri Anil Swarup to share good stories, and I'm sure he will say this in his own words, to share good stories so that they can be scaled, replicated all over the country, and in a big way. Of course, there's a lot of inspiration from the Dalai Lama, who said that the roots of all goodness lie in the soil of appreciation for goodness. So that's where the inspiration comes from. I believe we have Mr. Vijay Bhaskar also there. Can we have the video on him, please?
I think they're just logging in. It's going to be another minute.
Another minute? Okay. I'll also like to invite a fellow trustee at Akshara, Rekha Menon, who is also chairperson of Accenture India. Rekha, can you just come on?
Hi.
Yeah, just come on with the video as well. Yeah, hi Rekha.
Hi.
So, Rekha has been a trustee at Akshara for as long as I've been. So that's almost forever, right?
Yes.
As we just heard, she's slated also to be the next chairman of Nasscom.
Inshallah.
Okay. All right. Let's just get Shri Vijay Bhaskar. Sir, we'll have Mr. Vijay Bhaskar speak for a few minutes and then yourself. And then after that, we would like the three of you to launch the little toolkit that we have created. One of the things at Akshara that we strongly believe in is in the Creative Commons, which is whatever learning we have, we want to put it out in public domain so that nobody reinvents the wheel. So it's out there. Sushmita, any word from the Chief Secretary's office?
You say he's on. I don't see him. Just give me a second. Sorry.
Should we start with Mr. Anil Swarup then?
I think we'll start with Sir Anil Swarup. They're having some kind of a technical issue. They need to re-log in.
Okay. Sir, I know this is against a little bit of protocol, but we will have you speak first, sir, with all due respect, sir.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be amidst you all. And another pleasure was to see Namita and Shankar also there. I heard them. Having seen how Diksha evolved, in fact, this morning, Anita Karwal messaged me that Diksha is doing extremely well, and she gave me some numbers which was stupendous. So my compliments, because Namita was originally associated with Diksha when she was part of CSF. And Shankar, of course, is the author of all that is happening. So compliments to them for what they're doing. But compliments to you, Ashok. I think you talked about Nexus of Good. This inspiration of Nexus of Good came when I went to Bangalore and went to one of your schools. And I saw Ganit Kalika in operation in the field. And as they say, seeing is believing. Many people have spoken about so many great things, but until you see them happen, you don't feel inspired. And I was truly inspired with what I saw. And around that time, when I was visiting various states, going deep inside, I visited places like Bhaskar and Sukma, traveled from Pune to Goa, looking at the schools in the villages. And the best was traveling from Srinagar to Leh, not taking the national highway, going deep inside mountains to see what is happening in the country regarding education. And I was absolutely amazed. What I saw was something which surprised me, because the general understanding of education was very different in Delhi. Unfortunately, we sitting in Delhi believe that all wisdom resides here. And I was gradually discovering that how wrong it was. And in fact, not only in Delhi, I remember some quintessential advisors coming all the way across the Atlantic telling me in India, because I was arguably the most illiterate and uneducated officer to have become secretary of school education, because I had no experience in school education. This word went around, and there were kind people from all across the world coming to tell me how it should be done. And one gentleman from across the Atlantic told me, please visit Finland, England, Holland, Scotland, all the lands of the world. And before he could complete his list of names of lands, I asked him, have you seen motherland? Which he didn't understand to begin with, but he ultimately dawned on him. And that led me to visit the countryside, and I was quite amazed at what I saw. I could see what sort of local interventions and the changes that were making. I was actually listening to the discussion that you're having before this session. And what was being spoken about was absolutely correct. There are solutions that are available. Now, portals like Diksha have the potential of scaling them, of reaching out to a larger number of people. And that's how I think everyone has to come together. And that's the whole idea of Nexus of Good. Can we pick up good work happening around, so that as you will be launching one of your tools today, why should everyone reinvent everything? If we have platforms like this where people can contribute and see what good is happening where, it can work. And that's precisely what really needs to be done if you got to do things. Now technology allows you to do that. Maybe 10 years ago, it was not possible. Today, technology allows you to share. And unfortunately, we don't do that sufficiently, because everyone is attempting to build his own empire. And that's what Nexus of Good is all about. Create platforms where people could exchange notes, understand each other, learn from each other, leverage goodness, and let goodness grow. Because I have often said, if all the rascals and ruffians of the world can come together and make life difficult for us, how about good people coming together? And what I saw in Bangalore and what I saw in the rest of the country, which forced me to think, or which induced me to think about creating this platform called Nexus of Good. And I'm so glad you mentioned about it at the beginning. But I must also compliment you for understanding the fundamental requirement of a child. And that's where I do believe what Akshara is doing is absolutely phenomenal. Because unless you have that foundational grounding, no matter what you do otherwise, the guy is not going to, or the children are not going to grow. Actually, quite literally speaking, if the foundation is not sound, which should be both in terms of numeracy and literacy, if it is not good enough, then what are you going to do thereafter? I mean, all the Nasscoms and all the EkSteps there will be nothing. If they can come together to build that foundation, and that's where I found Ganesh Kalekar doing a phenomenal job. And I was so glad that I was, partly instrumental in taking your organization to other states. And I hope they're doing pretty well in states like Odisha as well. And not only in your case, wherever I went, if I found something good, people used to ask me, what are you doing as Secretary of School Education? I said, I have become a principal facilitator, School Education, Government of India, not Secretary Education, Government of India. Because my job was primarily to roadshow, because I was in a position where probably people listened to me at that point in time. When you're Secretary of School Education, people listen to you. They may not listen to you afterward, but at that point in time, they do listen to you. And if you can talk about practices like the ones that are happening either here or the phenomenal work that was being done in EkStep, which was leveraged to set up this Diksha portal, if this could be spoken about, talked about, leveraged, I think it grows. And I saw the evidence of it. And I'm so glad even after retirement, I see all these practices growing. And that's what we need to do. And that's what each organization that is involved has to come together and see what is already happening, how understand them, and see everyone could come together and do it. So thank you for inviting me here. I can go on and on. These days I'm doing the easier part. I'm doing the talking part. Walking is very difficult. I don't have to walk. So anyone who invites me to a webinar, I say most welcome, because that's the easiest thing to do. Talk, talk and talk. And now no one questions you. Why aren't you doing it now? Because earlier as Secretary of Education, they used to ask me, if you are talking about this, why don't you do it? Now no one asks me. I don't have to do anything. So I can go on and on, but I won't. But I would love to listen to Vijay Bhaskar, he's here. And let's see what Karnataka is doing. But one thing which the initial technical glitch that you had, you must be aware, fully conversant with the problems with technology, to what extent it can go. That is one. Number two, where technology is not available. In fact, under the Nexus of Good Ages, we had a workshop, we had a webinar where we spoke about reaching out to children where there's no internet, or the bandwidth is so low that they can't use anything else, and there are no smartphones. How do you reach out to them? I still believe there'll be more than 60-70% children where sufficient bandwidth is not available for outreach. Now, we were talking about handicapped children, but I think there's a larger segment of handicap of technology. I think that should be talked about, spoken about. How do we reach out to them? Hopefully, we would tide over this COVID situation, but it has taught us many lessons, and I hope we learn from them. Thank you very much for inviting me here, and compliments to you for doing what you're doing. Keep it going. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Vijay Bhaskar, good evening to you, and my apologies for breaking the protocol a little bit. Let me begin by introducing you to our audience. Shri Vijay Bhaskar is the Chief Secretary, Government of Karnataka, and has a Master's in Economics from BITS Pilani, followed by an MBA from the University of Birmingham, and he joined the IAS in 1983. Has been across in multiple roles, in the state government and elsewhere. And clearly, from what I've seen and heard, he's respected for being a man of details and data. And I have had the privilege of experiencing this firsthand when he was Principal Secretary for Education. And one other fact that very few people probably know, he is a great lover of the game of cricket. So with those few words, sir, may I request you to please deliver your inaugural.
Thank you, Ashok, and Mr. Anil Swarup, and all the participants of this webinar. It's a privilege for me to address all of you. I have been associated with Akshara Foundation since 2000, when I was Commissioner of Public Instruction. I worked in the education sphere as in different capacities: District Primary Education Program, Commissioner of Public Instruction, Secretary of School Education, Secretary Higher Education, in different spheres for more than 8 years. So I have some basic understanding of education as an administrator. What I have found is that in education, there's a great focus only on what the curriculum is, what the syllabus is. So teachers, there is a mad rush for them to complete the syllabus, complete the curriculum within, say, by the end of the academic year. So they rush through classes. It is not children. It is not at the pace. No one tries to find out whether the child has learned. In this mad rush, and every policy makers, outside stakeholders, whether it is political parties or the government, they are more interested in what the syllabus is, what the curriculum is, what is there in the curriculum, what is not there, what has to be added, what has to be deleted. But unfortunately, in all this, we lose sight of the fact that the child, when she passes out, requires these 3 R's. It is as basic as that, though it may sound somewhat basic. If at the end of 10th standard, I remember reading that in the Japanese education system, At the end of class 10, when they graduate from class 10, the Japanese education system aims to ensure that the child can do basic maths, can read, and can write. That is all. The 3 R's, basically. In our mad rush to write textbooks which are more and more comprehensive, which are more and more learned, and to complete the syllabus, and to add and delete chapters and issues and subjects from the syllabus, we lose sight of the fact that basic goal of education is to make the child learn, give her the capacity to learn. And that learning capacity we give by ensuring that she can do the 3 R's by the time she passes out of class 10. Therefore, she can learn on her own. She learns with the help of teachers, books, different resource material. When in this sort of a scenario, Pratham's learning Asar was the first. It was one of the first shocks that came into the system, where the focus was on what is learned by the child. And as school education secretary, when we looked at, and I looked at, and my officers, we all looked at the Asar scores, we found that maths was the weakest area of children. And even in maths, we found division, multiplication. Division was the hardest. Children were scoring least in division. Addition and subtraction, they were doing fairly well. But division was worst, and multiplication slightly better. So in this scenario, was with Rohini's, she with the Akshara Foundation. I remember one of the first initiatives of Akshara Foundation was to set up libraries in slum areas and low-income group areas, which was an extremely thoughtful initiative of Rohini and the team from Akshara Foundation. So in this scenario, Akshara Foundation's initiative to take up this Ganika Kalika Andolana in Karnataka to give the basics of maths education was extremely thoughtful, and it was very great felt need of the education system. And thanks to Akshara's help, and of course the efforts of all the Department of Education, all the teachers, the two students, and the parents, to Karnataka in the different NCRT National Achievement Survey and Niti Aayog Education Quality Index. Karnataka secures the highest position in case of maths among all states in grade 3 and in grade 5. So this is partly, I'm sure, due to the efforts put in by the Ganita Kalika Andolna by Akshara Foundation. And I am very grateful to Akshara Foundation, Rohini Nilekani and Ashok Kamath and all the entire team for this initiative. During this current pandemic also, Akshara Foundation has made a number of videos for teaching maths, for teacher training, and these are all available on the YouTube and the Diksha platform, which is I'm sure it is of great help to teachers. I hope that this effort by Akshara Foundation also, I remember, was involved in library reading movement, and this is partly taken up also by the education department. Then we used to have a reading class. So every other day we would have library reading class. The children would read from books, library books would be handed out. So this was reading, maths, this emphasis that has come about due to the focus by Pratham and Akshara Foundation and Asar studies are much needed course correction, I would say, in our educational system. So I hope this effort will bring us, will take us more back or will take us closer to the basics. Whenever I find a lot of debate about what should be added in syllabus or what should be added in curriculum, the people who talk about this do not understand that if a child cannot read what is there in the curriculum, merely going to read and understand and apply whatever is there in the curriculum, merely adding more and more subjects, more and more issues, making different things and including different subjects in the curriculum is of absolutely no. So we look at all these from the middle class, our children's point of view, but this is not, because the majority of learners in our school system require the basics, and this is where efforts of Akshara are very topical. I congratulate Akshara, and I hope that they stick to this basic task that they are working on, especially on mathematics, which is the weakest area among all the subjects in our children, and especially the focus on division and multiplication, which is very much needed. So all strength to Akshara and to the entire team and to Ashok Kamath and his team. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to join you, and I wish the webinar all success. Thank you very much.
So much, sir, for those kind words and the encouragement. May I request the two of you, Mr. Vijay Bhaskar sir and Mr. Anil Swarup sir, along with Rekha, to launch a toolkit that we have created that has all of Akshara's content available freely. This will all be up on Akshara's YouTube channel for free downloads. We will have it in multiple languages. I'm sure Rekha will talk a little more about that in a minute. Rekha?
Thank you, Ashok. So I just wanted to put a plug in here for Akshara, because the innovation that we are seeing today and that we are launching is really because of Akshara's belief in the Creative Commons. So everything, as Ashok said, is available for download and in multiple languages so that it reaches the maximum number of people. And Shri Vijay Bhaskar, you said back to basics, and this is very much basics, because absolutely maths is absolutely needed. And Shri Anil Swarup, you mentioned the Nexus for Good. So this is a collaborative effort, and we cannot succeed without a collaboration across the entire ecosystem. And we've seen in this 1 year where our children have lost a whole year of education. Ashok quoted a number which was several $1 billion, but I think it's much more, because it's not just an economic toll, but it's also an emotional toll on the children and a cultural toll on the children and their ability to come back. So this should never happen again. And for that, we actually need to put our children at the center. We in the private sector talk about our customer at the center. We need to put the child's education at the center of everything as we redesign our models. And this is an opportunity actually for us to rethink our model of education, rethink learning. And while technology can be a big enabler, and it should be, but it will actually mean, back to your nexus of good, a collaboration across a large ecosystem. So with that, back to you, Ashok.
Yeah. So if the three of you can, we shipped you these things, if you can remove the ribbon.
Proudly so.
And open the thing. It has, in your packets, there is a thumb drive with approximately 25 hours of content in each language. Currently available in English, Kannada, and Hindi, but by March, we will have it in an additional 6 languages. There is also a teacher's manual for Ganit Kalika Andolan, a flyer on our Android app called Building Blocks, and the specifications for the Ganit Kalika Andolan kit, which is in use in approximately 85,000 schools across Karnataka, Odisha, and Andhra Pradesh. So, Mr. Swarup, I suppose that could qualify as scaling up.
I think that is scaling up, actually. That's what it is all about. And I'm sure many would benefit out of what you're doing. And not merely in Karnataka and Odisha, but in other parts of the country as well.
Yeah.
So maybe I can suggest to you straight away that you should put it up on the Nexus is a Good platform as well.
Yes,
because there are many people who visit that platform to see what's happening elsewhere. And maybe we can have a further discussion on what you've done in this on the Nexus is a Good platform where other states can also come and see. I'm not sure about the number of states participating in the webinar today, but maybe in one of the webinars organized by Nexus is Good, where a number of states do participate, can benefit out of what is being done here. Yeah. And they would certainly get benefit out of it.
Thank you very much, sir. So with that, we will just screen a short film which gives like a 2-minute trailer of all the things that are in these videos, in this 25 plus hours of programming. But before we do that, Mr. Vijay Bhaskar, sir, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. I know that times are not easy these days with all the COVID and everything else that's going around. And Mr. Anil Swarup, thank you so much for your encouragement. I always remember your words, that politically acceptable, socially desirable, financially viable, technically feasible, and administratively doable. And that's never left my lips. Thank you so much. Rekha, thanks so much.
God bless you. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Akshara Foundation has done a Ganita Kalika Andolana. We have made a few videos for teaching mathematics. These are done for training the teachers, how to teach the students the various methods, how the TLMs in the kit can be made at home. What was our experience in making these videos? We would like to share it here with you.
Learning is not limited just to classroom learning. Along with the Maths kit, make their own TLMs and use them both to provide the best learning experience. Using these, how can we provide the best of education to children? We have tried to show this in these videos.
How do we participate? As a teacher, I should not just go on teaching. I will take the lesson. You do the math, children. This will not work with the children. As an enabler, as a facilitator, involving the children, making them play, giving them a chance to play, involving the children. In what way can we teach how to take up the mathematics topics so that they can absorb it well? For this purpose, we made this video.
Thank you. Our next session is the voice of the Indian diaspora in educating India's children. We have 4 people based in the United States who've woken up early this morning to be part of this, and we are immensely grateful to all 4 of you. The moderator for this session is a trustee at Akshara Foundation, Nishit Acharya. I first met Nish when he was the CEO of the Deshpande Foundation, and we've been friends for a long time since then. He joined our board in 2016. He's co-founder and CEO of Equal Innovation. He's a regular contributor to Forbes. He was part of President Obama's administration and also prior in Bill Clinton's administration. I'm hoping he won't leave us and go and join the Biden administration now. he's done, he's so much work in social enterprises and innovation, connecting, enterprises with impact investment and, the likes. I'm also fond of his book that he's written on how India-US trade can be $1 trillion. I think the pandemic would have put a little damp on that for the time being, but a little bit, yeah. So, so Nishit, over to you, and to please introduce our panelists, Vijay, Chaya, and Vasu.
Great, thank you, Ashok, and good evening, everyone, and good morning from all of us. That is just how excited we are about Akshara and educating Indian children, that we are all here at 7 o'clock in the morning, our time, to do this. We have an amazing panel. As Ashok mentioned, we're all from the US, but I wanted to just start with a few comments about the diaspora in general, because I know many of you and many in India look at the diaspora as a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And so I wanted to lay out sort of some of my experiences with Akshara, with Akshara Foundation, with America India Foundation, about the diaspora, and then turn it over to our panelists to each tell their incredible stories as diaspora members, how they've been working with Akshara and other Indian NGOs to give back in the ways that they can. And so the first is that the diaspora, as many of you know, is very different, and the Indians who are in the Gulf are very different from the Indians in the UK, who are different from the Indians in Canada, who are different from the Indians in the United States. And so when an organization thinks about the diaspora, it's very important to say which part of the world am I focused on, and then to go from there, because it's just very different dynamics because of immigration and some of the other things. And so that's the first thing about the diaspora. The second, and I've mentioned this to Ashok and countless other Indian NGO leaders, is that fundraising and getting expertise from the diaspora, it's a significant time commitment. The United States is a very big country. It'll take you just a week to do a short trip to Boston, New York, and Washington, D.C., and then it'll take you another week to do San Francisco, Los Angeles, Seattle, and you'll have skipped over the very large cities of Chicago, Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, and anywhere else. And so, for Indian NGOs that are considering raising money in the United States, it's important to remember that the United States is a big country, and so time commitment is important for that. But also that means time from your India side. And so that might be 2 weeks a year, that might be 6 weeks a year if you visit 3 times. And so it's important to realize that that's time away from your work in India spent with the diaspora. And that sort of leads me to my next thing, which is that the diaspora is very keen to engage in India. In fact, the next census we have in 2020 shows that there'll be about 5 million Indian Americans, almost 1 to 2% of the U.S. population, depending how the final numbers come out. So it's a significant community, and more than about 85% of them are actually born in India. So there's not a lot of people like me born in the United States. It's mostly people raised in India, familiar with the Indian education system, who often want to give back at different points in their careers. So it is a tremendous opportunity, but it's also an uneducated community in that they are all only familiar with their school district, their community, their state. And so an Indian NGO coming to raise from the diaspora has to commit the time, resources to educate the diaspora and to get going. And the last thing I'll mention, and our speakers will talk a little bit about this, is you got to have friends in the United States to work with you. And so it's not something that can be managed from India, but it's something where you need to get everybody from your cousin who's here as an H-1B all the way to your old classmates who become an IT CEO. You need to rally the troops as much as you can because there's a little bit of, as they say, work, wealth, and wisdom required. And you can get all three from the United States. There's quite a few educators here who have knowledge of the US system and expertise that groups like Akshara are benefiting from. There's quite a few wealthy Indian Americans that you can raise money from. And then there's quite a few who will work and organize the fundraisers and call their friends and manage the 501c3, the nonprofit registration. And so the diaspora can play a role in all of those things, from expertise to fundraising. And so all of you who are considering it, I think it can be a tremendous opportunity, as long as you go in with your eyes open and aware of the fact that the United States is a big country. People require a lot of time. And once you spend that time, they will donate. We know that Akshay Patra now raises $7 to $8 million a year in the United States. Pratham raises about $10 million a year in the United States. Magic Bus, others have also started raising quite a bit. So once the show gets rolling, it can be a very beneficial community and very supportive community. But again, being prepared to put in the time and energy. And I think the story of our three speakers will really help all of you with that. So I want to turn it to our first speaker, Ms. Chaya Rao, who's one of the founding members of the North Carolina Pratham RTP chapter. She was president of the chapter from 2012 to 2014. And early on, she was instrumental in leading the area, particularly the Kannada families, to raise funds for Akshara, and in particular for the 3-year pilot project in Hoskote block in Bangalore rural to support a program to teach math to 4th and 5th grade students. To date, the Kannada families continue to support Akshara Foundation. She's also been involved, as most diaspora have, with local projects, including a charter school, which is a K through 12 program here in the United States and North Carolina, and in various leadership positions as well. Professionally, she's Chief Compliance Officer at Shaw Capital Management, which is an investment company, and she's worked as an advocate for children's causes. So Chaya, I'd love to turn it over to you to share a little bit about your background and your experience motivating and mobilizing funds in the diaspora community in North Carolina.
Absolutely, Nish. Thank you very much for the introduction. And I also would like to thank Akshara for this opportunity. Yes, it has been an amazing journey. We started the Pratham RTP chapter here in the Raleigh area in 2005. And I joined 6 other couples, absolutely didn't know them. They didn't know me. And our journey began from there on. And of course, I would be amiss if I did not give credit to Dr. Padmini, who is actually the current Pratham Trustee of Pratham Mysuru. She was the inspiration behind me getting involved with Pratham and introduced me to Pratham. I had not heard of this organization in 2004 when I met her. And she encouraged me and she said, you know what, I think you should start a chapter here. And that's when, I said, okay, I mean, it seemed formidable at that time. But today, when I look back, I mean, here we are. Pratham RTP is doing great. And, it has been quite challenging. And I kind of really agree with, the points that you made. And that has been my experience. One thing I want to put out there, by the way, Dr. Padmini is a retired professor from the University of Mysore, and she continues to develop and create education materials even to this day for children. One thing is, when we started the chapter here in 2005, there were so many questions that came to us. And for me too, I had the very similar questions that some of my friends and community members were asking when we started the chapter. And I realized the best way to be a good advocate, a good ambassador of this cause is to actually go find out. And so my husband and I, we made a trip to Bengaluru in 2005 in summer. And that's when my journey with Akshara also started. I met Ashok Kamal and his team and had the opportunity to look at some of the schools, trying to understand, what is Pratham work? What is Pratham? How do they go about it? That was eye-opening experience. It was phenomenal. And I mean, it was absolutely unforgettable. That kind of really helped me, especially, build a chapter, because once you know what Pratham is, what Pratham does, it really makes it a lot easier to do fundraising, to reach out to people and explain to them. Then I also made a trip to Mysore, where Dr. Padmini, took me around to the schools, helped me explain, and I saw what the teachers, the volunteers, the children, what they were accomplishing. And so that was, what made me realize and say, okay, you know what, this is something that I really want to get involved and do something. And frankly, the fact that, we do put in a lot of time, effort, energy, like as you said, end of the day, when I look at what's happening there in India at the grassroots level, I think it makes it all well worth it. And we started the chapter in 2005 with maybe we raised about 50,000 or so, but today, 15 years later, we raised between 150 to 200,000. And I think, Pratham has become a household name. Nobody knew about Pratham in 2005, but today it's a household name. And because of my involvement with, my connection with Ashok and being in touch with him, he also kind of, roped me into this Hoskote block, and maybe I'll, kind of throw a little more color on that, because that was also what really brought the work we do here to the forefront, where, Akshara Foundation gave the Kannada families here an opportunity in 2011. And to this day, and we were the ones who actually helped raise $60,000 for this pilot project at Hoskote from 2011 to 2014. And as I think most of you may already know, those who are, been involved with Akshara, that pilot project was a huge success, and which resulted in the Karnataka government actually issuing a government order where it said that, here, Akshara, we're going to fund this project so that you can scale it to the Hyderabad, Karnataka area. And the second round of funding came in 2016, and they scaled it to another 6 districts. So for us, it was really amazing to involve the Kannada families here, and part of this pilot project. And today, as you know, Ganita Kalika Andolana is, that's what everybody's talking about. And I was very pleased to hear that, it's still ongoing. It's a huge success, and we are proud to be part of Akshara. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Chaya. We'll come back to some of your experiences. Our next speaker is Vasu Aitala, who's a longtime Houston resident, community volunteer and organizer, actively involved in the arts, culture, education, and social sectors. He's working with many NGOs in India, including the Retd Foundation, Vidya Poshak, Udupi, and Akshara. And he is the secretary of the Hoysala Charitable Trust, which is a US-based nonprofit organization that obviously works with a lot of Indian NGOs as well. So Vasu, why don't you share with us a little bit about your story and your experience, and then we'll have Vijay as our third speaker.
Thank you, Nishit. Thank you for introducing me. It's a privilege to be part of today's webinar, because this is a very important webinar, and what Akshara is doing is a very commendable job. So I have been associated with Akshara less than 2 years now, so I'm glad to be part of this important webinar today. So my involvement with, or my relationship with Akshara was a coincidental one. My sister in Mangalore always insisted that whenever I come home, she would take me to one of the or two of the government schools to just to get a feel how the schools are run and what the needs are, with the intention that I'd be able to help. So in one of that visit, I visited one of the Gram Panchayat primary school, where I asked the math and science teacher, how can I help you to improve the education, your job, make your job better for the children? And she said, sir, we have this something called teaching and learning material kit here. This is yet to come to our school, but this is going to help me teach math better. I got excited about that, and I started learning more about the TLM, and that led me to learn more about Akshara. And a couple of things which really got me liking Akshara is, one of them is their focus is on learning outcome. So there are different NGOs working in different aspects of education in rural India, but learning outcome is a lesser known, I would think, because when you go to a school, you ask a school headmistress or teacher, what do you need for your school? The first thing is bench, building, fan, those kind of questions. But a lot of schools need a lot of help with getting the outcome that is desired. And these foundational literacy is the most important thing. Like many of the speakers have already spoken, foundational math is so important because I have raised 2 kids in the US, so I know what it means. So that was one of the things that got me excited with Akshara. The second thing is that they have a very scientific way of measuring success. What we believe in corporate sector here is that what cannot be measured cannot be improved. So Akshara has the statistics, they measure the growth of student literacy, and they do the intervention where it is needed. This was 2 exciting things which got me involved in Akshara. So I worked with their regional administrator and got a block coordinator for Mangalore North District so that a lot of those schools can get Akshara's help. With that, I'm also a secretary of Hoysala Charitable Trust, which is a trust started by some of the Kannadigas in 2004 with the sole intention of building a school in a place called Midigeshi in Tumkur district. And in 2009, Hoysala handed over a wonderful school for rural Karnataka where 300 students are benefiting from that school. So as an office bearer of the Hoysala Trust, I introduced support to Akshara this year, especially because of the pandemic and the digital divide where many of the economically backward schools are not benefiting from the online classes. And my first-hand experience going to some of the schools in a port town like Panambur, where I live, is that 95% of the students are all from migrant community. When this pandemic came, all these migrants were displaced. They had to go back to their villages. Children lost education. And my fear is that a year from now, if they don't come back to school, they probably will follow their parents' profession of being a coolie or unskilled labor. So Akshara's plans to address those are very, very meaningful. So with that, I introduced a request to our board in Hoysala that we support Akshara's project this year. And the first project we were able to support, I'm happy to say that we provided the sponsorship to part of the training video that was just released earlier. The teachers training video was supported by Hoysala Trust. So the fundraising was done here in Houston locally. I have done, we try to do it in 2 ways. One is targeted donors and the other one is crowdsourcing. I will share the experience of that when the topic comes up. But overall, we are the community in Houston who supported this effort can be proud at what we could do in a little way in Akshara's big effort to bring quality education to rural Karnataka and rural India. So with that, Nishit, I will be open to any questions you have.
Great. Thank you so much, Vastu. We'll have some introduction from our third speaker before we jump into some discussion. Vijay Vimulapalli is a secretary and board member for VIBA. He's been leading VIBA since 1994 and has been actively working with project partners in India. Having been a product of the public education system in India, he has a special interest in its success. Vijay does quite a few things, as I learned in our preparatory call for this. He lives in Atlanta and works professionally for Equifax. So with that, Vijay, why don't I turn it over to you? Tell us about your various experiences as a member of the diaspora.
Sure. Thank you, Nishit, for the introduction. VIBA is an organization primarily driven by volunteers. We have regular, people working 9-to-5 jobs, full family responsibilities, but have one of the fundamental principles as eloquently put by Ripan Kapoor, the founder of TRI, what I can do, I must do. That is one of the driving principles. And another driving principle is, of course, to go back to the country of origin, India. So these are the two things. Our vision is to make sure that every child attains their right to health, education, and opportunity. Our mission is to enable, educate, and empower everybody, every individual who wishes to make a positive difference in the lives of underprivileged children. Now, these are our vision and mission statements. Our model is to seed, scale, and grow. We want to identify scalable and replicable solutions in India that can make a huge impact. So for the past few years, more recently, even more, we are focused on public education in India. One of our great examples is when we picked up a project, an organization called Shikshana in 2005, also from the same state as Akshara, Karnataka. And we scaled it up to almost the entire state of Karnataka now and replicating it in several other states, in Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, and Maharashtra. So, as I said, we are very focused on public education, going forward even more so. Currently, we are supporting about 25 projects in about 12 states across India. We typically raise more than $1 million a year. So far, we have invested about $18 million over the years and reached about 2 million children. But as we are identifying more and more scalable and replicable solutions, and Akshara is one of the organizations that we have picked up in this endeavor. We will be supporting Akshara's effort in Odisha. In fact, we should have started this year, but for the pandemic, so we are ready to go with their effort in Odisha from next year onwards. So this is who we are, and this is what Vijay is. We enable every individual who wishes to make a difference, and we enable the corporates. We bring along corporates in this effort, and of course, ultimately, if we want to make a huge impact, it's the government that can move the mountains, right? So that is what we are interested in. We had entered into MOUs with the state governments of Gujarat and Andhra Pradesh, and we have entered into MOUs for some of our efforts in Tamil Nadu with corporates. So we are interested heavily in scale, and we are looking forward to partner with Akshara in this effort.
Great, thank you, Vijay, and we'll definitely come back to that. I want to start with a question that goes to the title of this panel, the voice of the diaspora. And what is the voice of the diaspora? What is our value add, if you will? Ashok and the team are sitting in India. They're doing the hard lifting. They're doing the work. They have knowledge of regulations in India. What value do you see our communities adding? And it may be different for all of you, but I'd like to dive into that for our audience to understand that it's some of it might be the check that we write, but what other value are we adding? What is our voice in this role? Chaya, I'll start with you. I believe you're mute, Chaya.
I think we have a good, strong voice here, but we can't work in vacuum. Yes, we'll raise money, we will do our part, but when NGOs there locally are willing to reach out and work with the chapters like ours, I think that makes a big difference. And I have to give credit to Ashok Kamath for that, where we here in locally, like Kannada families, I mean, we had reached a point. See, 2005 we started the chapter, and in 2010 donors were saying, okay, we are donating to Pratham, but I want to see what my money is doing for me. And I want to be able to go see the children, what is the outcome? And it was so timely that, Ashok reached out to me and said, do you think you can raise $60,000, give a commitment for 3 years? Now, if that didn't happen, I don't know whether I would have been able, and few other Kannada families that I've worked with, retain at least about 20-25 families for a period of 10 years and help make a difference. And today, these Kannada families are part of this Ganita Kalika Andolana, which, is like really huge. They feel important. They're part of history. And all of this happened because, we got this connection through Ashok and the opportunity. So that's what I feel, that's really important, so that what we do here actually translates into the outcome that, that's what donors are all about. They give the money, but that's not good enough for them. They want to know, they want results.
Right. Vasu, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I had to say what Chai had mentioned earlier. One of the important things what diaspora can do is advocacy, and only way to do the advocacy is get involved. And I believe from my little experience of fundraising, the days of writing the check and forgetting about it are gone. People want to write check and want to know what has been done and where their money is working and how hard it is working. So they would like to get a response back from where the money has gone. So that poses challenge with respect to the kind of work Akshara is doing, because Akshara's work doesn't yield a result immediately. It's not like you pay 1 lakh rupees to build a stage and next day, the next month or 2 months later, the stage is ready. The teacher's training video, the children training video, all these videos will yield results in 5 years, 10 years. And of course, Akshara is doing a very good measurement. So the best part would be for people to, one of the things I've been trying to convince my friends here is that do what I accidentally did, that visit a school in your village and understand, look at the children there and compare them to the children living in affluent or in a city and how they benefit, and see how much of value you can bring when you allow these kids in rural communities to have the same opportunity what the urban kids have, and how much benefit these kids will come, and what major changes that will bring to their family and to the country in large. I think that advocacy has to happen, and that can happen only with us involving. And visit a school is something that I think I wish to promote, and I think it's a good idea.
Great, thank you, Sarah, very much. Vijay, your thoughts on that? What is our voice as a diaspora?
Sure, yeah. I agree with what Vasu said, and I will echo that. In your next trip to India, please make an effort to visit an NGO. There are so many wonderful organizations doing fantastic work. So take a day or even a half a day of your trip to India to visit some of these efforts. So number one, enable these organizations. There are so many wonderful organizations doing fantastic work at the very grassroots level, and some are working at scale, working with the government. So visit them and enable them. That's number one. Number two, organizations in USA can help with cross-pollination. For example, in Vibha, we work with some of local partners in USA in digital education, with communities in schools, working in public education sector, right? So some of these efforts can be translated. Some of the knowledge transfer can be done to the efforts in India. And ultimately, take personal responsibility, particularly all of you from rural backgrounds, go back, visit your schools, see what you can do. And at an organization level, be thought leaders. We all have come here, have gained tremendous experience in various fields. Now, join, if you have even more time, join efforts in India and be the thought leaders and transfer all your expertise and professionalism into these organizations. You know, the non-profit sector in India has changed tremendously in the last 10 years, 10, 15 years particularly. I have been involved since 1994, but I have seen tremendous change in the last 10, 15 years. There's a lot of professionalism. And another huge development that we have seen in the last 10 years is the attitude of the government. They want to work with non-profits. That is a huge change. So now is the right time to make big differences, big changes in India. And I would encourage everybody to be a part of it.
Great. Thank you, Vijay. Another question that's come up in our discussion, and there's some questions about it on the chats as well. We often get invitations for fundraising for different groups in the United States working in India. And one of them might be our family community where they're doing science education in a school or math education. And then our spouse's family has another NGO working on math education in their village or their community. And we're trying to get to more integrated solutions. And that's something that comes up in the diaspora a lot is how do you be more efficient with fundraising? So, what is your advice, having visited lots of NGOs in India? What is your advice on more integrated solutions that you'd like to see from the Indian NGO sector? And why don't we go backwards this time and start with Vijay?
Sure, yeah. So again, this is a question as too many organizations. I think I do not agree with the premise of this thought that there is too much fragmentation. No, I do not agree with that. There is so much to be done, and there are so many wonderful organizations. Agreed, yeah, it would be wonderful to have an integrated approach. In fact, a lot of organizations on the ground are working for integration. There is a lot of scope on the ground in India for integration. But from a diaspora point of view, I would say for some time, don't worry about that question. And in fact, whatever you like, keep supporting, keep enabling them, and let the integration happen at the ground level, at the school level, at the district level. Let us aim for integration at that level, while the fragmentation of our effort, our support may be okay.
Thank you, Vijay. I tend to agree with you, but let's hear from the others because I think that we all hear that question, I think. So, yeah. Vasu?
Yeah, in my view, I think not all NGOs have the same goal. Everybody, even if you take the NGOs who are working towards education, they have different approaches. And I'm not a very experienced person working in NGO for too long of a period. So, but my layman advice would be that NGOs which have a common goal, that is education, but they have different approaches, should find some synergy in supporting education in India. I'm sure it's possible. Some may be working towards learning outcomes, some may be working towards providing infrastructure, some may be providing basic needs like housing, food, shelter. All of these are good, but there needs to be a synergy. But one thing I strongly believe is that the being involved makes it more easier to find where the resource is required. And from my experience, just sending the kid to school and providing uniform, books and all is not going to solve the problem, because the foundational literacy is so critical. And have first-hand experience of kids who have gone all the way up to 7th grade. They cannot do 2nd grade or 3rd grade math. And this is where organizations like Akshara Foundation really play a very important role. So I had a little bit of luck explaining to my friends who always believed that providing them the infrastructure is the key thing for education. I don't disagree with them, But after explaining them, you can send a kid to school, because a lot of these parents who do coolie work and all love to send their kid to school, not because they expect this kid to learn. I mean, of course, they expect them, but they find that because somebody is babysitting their kids during the daytime when they're working. So getting a literacy is very important. So there should be synergy among all these NGOs who have education in mind. And I think in the US, if anywhere it can be done, it can be done in the US. I believe in future that will be done.
Chaya, I want to, for perspective, want to spin the question a little bit for you, because you're on the board of a school in the United States as well. And so when you look at integrated solutions, do you think there's anything cross-country that can be done between the US educators and Indian educators, particularly through large groups like Akshara?
I think so. The school that I am on the board of, the charter school, is a high school, and we did look into it because they have robotics as one activity in this high school, and I know that Akshara Foundation also had some such robotic program, and definitely that is something we looked into, and I would like to continue to look into, because it is definitely going to not only benefit children here, but as well as the children back home. And we are right in the middle of this many IT corporations and science and technology and the whole 9 yards. So I do believe there is a synergy, and we should take advantage of that. Just to also kind of add to the point the other two panelists mentioned about the integrated solution, I just want to mention Karnataka KLP, the Karnataka Learning Partnership that Akshara has had for several years. It's a good example. It's like a bottom-up approach. I would look at it that way, where it is a fantastic technology, a public technology platform where data is being collected from several NGOs, and hats off to Akshara for really having that collaborative, very kind of embracing approach for several years, where they're working with all these NGOs, and the data is being put up on that platform, and they're using that. Each of these NGOs, as the other panelists also said, like they could have different vision, but that data would really help in assessing where each NGO stands. And after all, they're all working towards the child through multiple verticals, whether it's health, education, nutrition. And as a community, you kind of use the data to see, okay, how can our NGO do better to improve the quality of a child's life? And you look at it very holistically. And if I could just add one more point, that is at a local level. Globally, if you look at it, that also is happening through JPAL. Pratham has partnered with JPAL, which stands for Jameel Poverty Action Lab, which is at MIT. It is a global research center, and they have been using data as an independent third party to see how Pratham children are performing. And all of that evaluation that they do through randomized trials, that also has helped immensely, not only Pratham, but other policymakers and NGOs and the governments. And at the national level, if I could add, you have ASAN, which stands for Annual Status of Education Report, which, has been released for the last 12 years by Pratham. It's like an independent unit, which the government, at central, state, local level has been using the data, which is so valuable to not only allocate money, but also for forming education policy. It's being used by NGOs. It has come to stay in India. And so I would say that, integrated solution kind of is happening. Yes, and maybe have some more to do.
That's great. Thank you all. Unfortunately, we're out of time. We did have one question in the chat about the role of the education technology sector and for-profit companies in that space. And so I'll just mention that, from a diaspora perspective, for the Indian NGOs that are on the call, there are quite a few American companies. They're not just Indian Americans, but they are started by Americans focused on education for the developing world. And India is often the initial market of choice because of the English language compatibilities. And so there are opportunities to work with education technology companies. It's not very different than working with an American NGO. It's going to be about fit and content and curriculum, but there is quite a bit of exciting technology, artificial intelligence and others being developed that can be tapped into. For the startup I think if you're on this call and you're a US-based startup working in education technology, I think I would suggest my first phone call would be to Ashok Kamath to see how to partner with the thousands of schools that Akshara works in to see if there's opportunities for piloting. So with that, I want to thank our three panelists for their great insights, and of course also for the fabulous work that they're doing, and look forward to connecting with everyone again soon. So thank you very much, and Ashok, turning it back to you.
Thank you, Nish.
Thank you so much, Nish, Vijay, Chaya, and Vasu. And thank you all, as always, for your support in what we do here. We will now proceed with the next session, which is an evaluation, a perspective on the Ganita Kalika Andolan program. Chaya mentioned JPAL, and we have two stalwarts from JPAL here who will talk about their study that was done in two districts where Akshara had never worked before, in Tumkur and in Vijaypura. And they spent 13-14 months doing this research. It's my pleasure to introduce first Andy De Barros, who's at MIT. He's a postdoctoral associate in the Department of Economics, and he specializes in program evaluation and evidence-based education policy in less developed countries. Andy has a PhD in education from Harvard University with a concentration in education policy and program evaluation. So he partners extensively with JPAL and with something called Teaching at the Right Level in Africa, as part of his work. Our other panelist here, Professor Paul Glue, is a distinguished McKnight University professor at the University of Minnesota. Paul has a PhD in economics from Stanford University, and subsequent to that, the countries that he has worked in is like pretty much half the United Nations, all over Africa, Asia, and South America. And he's very highly respected academic, with a lot of publications and on the boards of several journals. And, he also served on JPAL's board as co-chair of the education sector from 2010 to 2014, and is currently a co-editor for economic development and cultural change. So they have a small presentation that they will make, and it will be shared between Andy and Paul. I don't know what sequence they're going to use, but I think, Andy, it's over to you with your screen sharing.
Right. Before I even share my screen, I wanted to say a great thank you to be part of this. Thank you, Ashok, and thank you also to the other panelists here. Thank you also, of course, to Paul, my co-presenter. I'll go first, but it's really joint work that we're presenting here.
Yeah.
Let me share my screen here. You should be able to see it now. Ashok, can you see it?
Yes, we can see it. Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So I want to start out, before even jumping at these results from this large experimental evaluation of Akshara's flagship program, I want to start with the most important thing, maybe just on the right first slide, and that is to say a big thank you. I want to say thank you because it's not normal for an organization to be so data-driven and so focused on evidence, but also to open itself up and to be ready to let somebody external come in and expose itself to an external evaluation. So that's not normal at all. It's also not normal at all to then promote these results and just go out to the world and say, here they are, look at that. Whatever we find, put it out there because we want to learn together. And I really want to comment that and say thank you to Akshara Foundation and also to the state government of Karnataka and this joint partnership that Akshara has to be open to doing that. I also want to especially thank Omidyar Network, who's put funding for that and generously supported this work. Beyond that, of course, our research participants, the many thousands of students that are part of this, the teachers that we spoke to, but also our research team at JPAL South Asia, who've worked with us on this, and our academic colleagues who've provided us feedback, especially Abhijit Banerjee, who you may know, Kartik Muralidharan, if you may know, but others as well, who have given us great comments and feedback on this study. Having said all of that, any remaining errors are our own, so this is our own work, and of course, this is us, and it's the results that we are sharing from this evaluation at our end. So I want to start out by just highlighting one more time just how severe the learning crisis is in India. And I'm going to show you a data point that I think is so far quite unknown. We know a bit about that from the great work that has been mentioned through the ASO report, but I want to just add one more piece here and just show like how severe the learning crisis is in India. So when I result from a separate study that I have on my website, I want to show you this graph, and I'm going to walk you through this in just 1 second. What you see here is whether students in India, and a representative sample of Indian students, are proficient at a 4th grade level. And I show you in yellow here whether they are proficient in things that things like the ASO test usually measures, like number recognition and basic arithmetic. So 4th graders, about 40% of the 4th graders are proficient at a 4th grade level. 6th and 8th graders, though, at a 4th grade level are only 60% proficient. So this is something that the ASO report has already told us, that there is this learning crisis. But if you then look at all the other things that a 4th grader is supposed to know, like, for example, basic geometry, things that are not necessarily harder to do, but just other things like, recognizing basic shapes, for example, distinguishing a square from a rectangle, for example, or a circle. Only about a quarter of the 8th graders are proficient at all these different things that a 4th grader is supposed to know. So it's really devastating, and the learning crisis is very severe in India. So, Akshara has recognized that and has come up with its response to that in partnership with governments. And what we're evaluating here is this program that has been mentioned several times now here, and of course, everybody who knows Akshara knows the program, which is the GKA program. And the GKA program really does 2 different things, or has different theories in 2 different ways. First, it provides the kits that you have seen, these boxes with teaching and learning materials. But it's not just providing materials to these schools, it's also training teachers in how to use that. And there's a theory behind that, that a student has to learn first practical things first, and then move to abstract understanding. The second component that the program has is to bring students together in Gram Panchayat contests. The students sit in a public assessments, and the Gram Panchayat, the school, and everyone in the community is informed of the results of this contest. And the community is supposed to be activated as a watchdog, and pressure is supposed to be created if there is not a lot of learning. So if you show what a child actually knows after 4 or 5 years in school, and if there is little, which often is the case, unfortunately, to create additional pressure and put additional pressure on the schools to make sure that learning happens. In this evaluation, we're going to be looking at both the program effect overall, but we're actually going to be able to tease out the effect also of having just the program with its teaching and learning materials and teacher training, and what it does to add these Gram Panchayat contests. This program is actually quite cheap. We hear a lot of talk about the potential of educational technology, but what makes this program also special is that it's much, much cheaper than some of the technology programs that are around there. So this program without the contest costs about $6.80 per year per student. Once you add the contest, it adds about another $1.30 per year per student. And if you put that into perspective and compare it, for example, to another program that has gained a lot of attention, like the MindSpark program that Educational Initiative puts out, it's about 1/10 or about 15% of that per year per student. So that makes the program really attractive. It's also easier to implement, of course, and putting all this technology in place. But I wanted to highlight that, that it's much more attractive from a cost perspective as well. So to give you a preview and in a nutshell, what we did and what we found, if you have to go away, those are the big findings that you should keep in mind. I want to show those right at the beginning. So we did a large randomized evaluation on the effects of the GKA program. So we randomized whether Gram Panchayats would receive the program or not. But again, as I mentioned, we also randomized whether the additional community contests were added to the program, yes or no. So that allows us to not only see the overall effect of the program, like in this mix of some Gram Panchayats receive the contest, some not, and the training and the kits, but it also allows us to see the effect of the contest. So, and the big headline finding is really like, if you mix all of these things together and compare it to a control group that did not receive the program, after 13 months of the program running, we actually do not find significant effects of the overall program on 4th grade math learning. We only find small, statistically insignificant improvements on 4th grade math learning. Now, when you divvy this up into the variant without the contest versus the one with the contest, the surprising thing here is that actually the variant without the contests had some small positive effects. And those effects were especially there for girls, but actually the 0 effects for boys. We also see that this program affected teaching quality, so improved teaching quality and student attitudes. But we can actually rule out again that adding these contests, the Grand contests, improved learning for students. And adding them, we observed actually caused negative effects on teaching quality and made the classroom environment more stressful for students. So let me go into more details of the study, but this is in a nutshell the main findings that we have. So the evaluation, is really in the context of GK's scale up across, about 40,000 schools in Karnataka's government primary schools. And within those, as Ashok just mentioned, we focused on 2 districts, one in the north and one in the south, Bijapur district and Tumkur district. So again, what you see here in like these little dots in different colors, but every dot here is a school. And we randomized whether GPs would receive the program, yes or no. And then every dot here is we sampled schools within these GPs. So we have 3 schools per GP. And then different colors here show you that either a GP did not receive the program at all, either the GP received the program without the contest, or the GP received the program, with the training materials and the box. But on top of that, also the contest. So in terms of a timeline, what this looks like is, we started working this 2 years ago. What you see here is months. And of course, our greatest interest is student learning in mathematics. And we actually administered both written and oral assessments. So both a written test and additional one-on-one oral assessment to all the students in these schools. Okay. So we have a baseline assessment before anything happened. Then we have a midline assessment. And then now what we're mostly going to be presenting to you here is the results from the endline assessment. But we did not just go ahead and say like, okay, all we care about is test scores. We also really wanted to understand what's going on in between. Now, is the program happening, A? But also if the program is happening, what does this program do in A, especially classroom instruction and instructional quality? And B, how students feel about mathematics, whether, for example, they're more excited about mathematics or whether they find the mathematics classes less stressful. So we measured these 4 times. So we went to schools 4 times to all of them, and unannounced, we sat in classrooms, but also spoke to students. And in one of these rounds, we even visited the homes of the students and spoke to the parents. Right? So how does this assessment and data collection line up with the overall intervention? Let me show you that here. So the intervention ran for a good 13 months. So after we had done the baseline in November 2018, at the beginning of 2019, the intervention started and ran then for 13 months. Now, I mentioned to you that we randomized who would get the intervention, who would not. So not everyone got the intervention. So we first, in December, randomized whether GPs would receive the program, yes or no. And then in December, we just said, those GPs would receive the kit and the teacher training. And that started in January 2019. But then in July, we also randomized on top of that whether another half of those treated GPs, what we call treated or intervention GPs or program GPs, would on top of that also receive the contest, yes or no. So again, we have one group that received nothing. We have one group that purely because of our random assignment, like in any other randomized trial, like in a medical trial, for example, would receive the teacher training and the kits. And then the third group would receive both the teacher training and the kits and these contests. And with this random assignment, we can just purely compare those. And what Paul is going to present to you in just 1 second is the difference in both the test scores, but also in terms of what we see in classroom instruction and quality. Our main focus, of course, is test scores, but we want to really show you what's going on after, like in terms in classrooms. And note here that, in terms of what's going on in classroom instruction, if I compare the group with versus without the contest, in the first, what we call process monitoring rounds, there shouldn't be any difference because they received the same program, right? Only in round 3 and 4, there's this additional contest, and then only in round 3 and 4, potentially we may see a difference in terms of those comparisons of have you received the contest on top versus have you just received the program without the contest. So I'm going to hand over to Paul now, and he's going to show us the results.
Thanks, Andy. So Andy's going to keep sharing his screen, and then I will tell him when to. So let's go to the next slide, Andy. Okay, so before we actually look at how kids did on the test scores, we want to make sure that the program was actually implemented as it was supposed to be, because I've been in other evaluations where, in fact, it really wasn't even implemented. So the bottom line is that it was implemented as planned or as intended. And so this graph here kind of breaks down implementation into 3 parts. So the top 1/3 of the graph here on training perception. Basically, the circles in the graph are the control schools, the ones that were randomly did not get the program, and the squares are the ones that randomly did get the program. And you can see that there's a pretty big difference. Actually, in the very first line, there's no big difference in terms of participation in teacher training, because we train the teachers, but also teachers get other teacher training. So all these teachers in both control and the treatment are getting training, but they were getting training in different things. But then when you look at the next lines here about whether the teachers actually got the things from Akshara, the GKA kits, and whether they were visited by the Akshara staff, well, none of the control schools got anything. You can see 3 zeros there, but 80 to 90% of the GPs or schools that were supposed to get the kits and were supposed to be visited received it. So the program was implemented. Then in the middle third of this graph, you can see that the teachers got the things that they were supposed to be getting. They got the kits. Now, one of the things about the Akshara, or the GKA program, is that there's a lot of group activity. And you can see that 41% of the classrooms in the treaty group had the activities and 11% did not. So that difference is not as big. But then when you look at the TLM, stands for teaching and learning materials, that the 75% of the program schools had the materials and were using the materials. And finally, the bottom of this graph, we're looking only at the schools that were randomly assigned, as Andy said, to the community contests. And so 86% of the schools had the contests, the ones that were randomly assigned, but the control schools did not have them. There's something called a report card that the schools are supposed to get after the contest. It kind of shows how they did and compares them to other schools in the area. Only about 1/3 of them got that. So that was one thing that wasn't completely implemented, at least not by the time we collected the data. And then the parents, ideally, the community is supposed to participate, but actually parents didn't really participate very much in these contests. But the students did. That's the last slide. 73% of the students said they repeated that participate. Anyway, so the bottom line on this slide is that the program was mostly implemented as planned. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so now we're going to look at the results. On the left side, what we're really showing here is what was happening in the control schools. Were kids learning more math? Well, yes, they were over the 13 months that we were observing them. So the overall gain in the math score of the control group was about 0.39 standard deviations of the distribution of test scores. So all these numbers we're going to show you about test scores, we like to express it in terms of standard deviations of the distribution of test scores. This is a pretty standard way to do this because everyone's doing different tests and different studies. So there is growth in math learning over this time period in these grade 4 students of about 0.4 standard deviations, which is about typical for many different countries in India studies. Okay. Now on the bottom, that's for the overall. On the bottom, we look at things from the ACER. These were tests that were administered that were relatively simple. We don't see as much for the lower level skills like 1-digit addition and things like that, probably because they mostly had those already, but we see better for higher level skills. But basically, this shows it. Okay, so Andy, the next slide. So the big question is what happened, how much did this program actually increased. So first we're going to compare all the treated schools. We're combine the ones that had the GP contest and the ones that didn't have the GP contest, compared to them to the schools that didn't have anything, the control group. And it's a little disappointing. We find the overall math score we estimate increased by 0.07 standard deviations of the distribution of test scores, but it's not statistically significant. So the lines there's actually two lines. The thicker one is a 90% confidence interval, and the thinner one, which is a little bit longer, is a 95% confidence interval. And the dashed line going up and down, sort of reddish dashed line, that's 0. So basically, we did not find a statistically significant effect because the 0 is within the confidence interval, whether it's a 90% confidence interval or a 95% confidence interval. So we didn't see that for the overall math score. I mean, we found a positive result, but it's not statistically significant. And then for these ACER scores, we didn't see any significant effects in them. Okay, let's go to the next slide. However, there are some differences when we divide up the students. And the big one we find is if we look at girls and boys separately. For girls, the impact was an increase about 0.14 standard deviations, while for boys it was almost 0. In fact, it was slightly negative 0.02. And the one for girls, again, this is combining both the schools with and without the contest. The ones for girls is significant at the 90% or the 10% significance level. It's 0 is outside the 90% confidence interval, but not significant when we go to a 5% significance level or a 95% confidence interval. So we find, you could say, marginally statistically significant effect of the program on girls and non-boys. We really don't know why it worked better for girls than boys, but we can talk about that later. And if you look at the bottom, we can statistically reject the hypothesis that the effect for the boys and girls was the same, okay? No, it wasn't the same. The boys did slightly worse, and that's significant even at the 5% level. Okay, let's go ahead to the next slide. We can also divide this up by the two different variances. As Andy said, after randomly assigning between treatment and control schools, we also, within the treated schools, randomly had some got the contests and some did not get the contests. And a little bit surprisingly, and Andy already mentioned this at the beginning, we find that with the contest, we're not seeing much of anything. Without the contest, we see an effect of a 0.012 standard deviations that is significant at the 10% level. It's the 0 is slightly outside the 90% confidence level. It's not significant at the 5% level. So again, grouping boys and girls together, we find that the variant without the contests seems to have worked better, although our statistical significance is not as high as we would like. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Let's see. Okay, then we can also look at like what was going on, sort of the mechanisms and things like this. So one issue is were parents becoming more involved in the school activities, because part of the program is supposed to get the community and especially the parents involved. Make a long story short, it didn't really get them involved. That was statistically insignificant, both with what the parents say they were doing and what the teachers say the parents were doing. However, on the brighter side, if you look at student attitudes towards mathematics, it did seem to improve, not a lot, 0.10 standard deviations in the full intervention with the contests and 0.08 without the contests. And that is statistically significant for the ones with the contest, but not without. So it seems to improve student attitudes towards math. We go to the next slide, Andy. Okay, and then we can ask about, well, how did teaching go? So we actually had observers watching the teachers teach, and there's a kind of a methodologies that's just come out from the World Bank called TEACH that shows kind of measures these different things. So we find that actually without the contest, if you look on the upper right there was improvement in instructional quality of about 0.15 standard deviations. But with the contest on the upper left, we don't see this improvement. And a couple of things kind of stand out. If you look at the next line, there's something called classroom culture, which is basically how well the teacher is making the kids feel comfortable in the class and encouraging and things like this. with the contest, it actually went down significantly, which suggests that the contest maybe put pressure on teachers, and then also it went down to the students and maybe just kind of made them more nervous and made the overall atmosphere in the classroom kind of became negative. On the other hand, if you look way down at the bottom, socio-emotional skills, this is just kind of psychologically how kids are feeling about school and so forth. It actually goes up in both variants of the program. So there's some good news there. Okay, one more, next one. We're almost done here. Okay, and here's something quite interesting. We was talking about the classroom culture, and Andy pointed out that we actually divided up the schools into the GP contest and without the GP contest right after round 2, okay? So if you look at the timing of things, in round 1 and round 2, the effect of adding the contest, well, there isn't any effect. It's not significant because we hadn't added them yet. They weren't added until after round 2. But then in round 3 and 4, you see a difference. You see that the overall teach measure of instructional quality goes down in the schools with the GP contest relative to the ones without the GP contest, and the classroom culture also goes down. So this suggests that when we introduced the GP contest, or when Akshara introduced them, that's when some negative things started happening in terms of instruction and classroom culture. So that was disappointing, but you kind of have to learn as you go along. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, that's it. Okay, so let me kind of wrap up here. So we find some suggestive evidence for math in grade 4 after 13 months, but it's kind of not highly significant. Go ahead and next one, Andy. Okay. The good news is that we can point out that the program did actually get implemented more or less as planned, so we can reject the hypothesis that it actually was implemented poorly. And we also can figure out with all the rich data have kind of what happened here or what didn't happen. We find that the intervention without the contest did improve learning, and the improvements for learning were for girls only, not for boys. It did improve student attitudes towards mathematics, and in the version without the contest, improved teaching quality. However, teaching quality went down, especially in the schools that had the contests. So it's kind of like the glass half empty or the glass half full here. We're finding some effects, but also finding some negative effects, and big differences between boys and girls, and also differences between the schools with the GP contest and without the GP contest. Okay, I think that's it. That's the last slide, right? Okay, it'd be great to hear what people have to say about this.
Thank you so much, Andy and Paul. There seem to be no Q&A questions right now, but I'm sure some things will come up. That was a great perspective, and there's a lot of learning here for us, to figure out how to embed it into GKA. We also have with us to share other perspectives, from the ground. We said we should hear voices from the field. So we have 3 voices who will speak briefly for 2 to 3 minutes each. I want to introduce Shri SKB Prasad. He's the principal and ex officio, DDPI diet in Chitradurga. Shri Prasad has over 25 years of experience in the education field and served in multiple roles from HM upwards into his current position, and is currently the DDPI in Chitradurga. The second person I would like to introduce is Shri Ramakrishna Sadalgi, who is the block education officer in Mundargi in Gadag. And he's been instrumental in organizing and implementing departmental projects, and has been actively involved in the space of children education and creative arts. Mr. Sadalgi, can you please put on your video? Namaskara. And finally, Srimati Rama Gunavara, she's been serving as the Panchayat Development Officer in Atkur village in Raichur. She's been there as the PDO for the past 11 years. And in the last 4 years, she's been actively engaged in running the Gram Panchayat contest that both Andy and Paul spoke about. For us, the Gram Panchayat contest is a way of transferring ownership of the program from Akshara over to the community and then to the system. So may I request Shri Prasad to speak first, followed by Shri Ramakrishna Sadalgi, and then
Good evening to all, sir. It is my pleasure to be a participant and a part of this program. And I wish all the dignitaries and all others on the eve of Ramanujam's birthday, National Mathematician birthday. I am here to say my words with regard to this Ganika Kalika Andolana. I am from the past 25 years. I am working as an educational administrator in Karnataka state. From the last 5 years, I am closely seeing this Ganika Kalika Andolana in my district in various capacity. I worked as a lecturer in a diet and worked as a reader in diet, and I am worked as education officer in administrative office, and right now I am working as a principal and ex officio DDP in diet Chitradurga, that is training center. From the last 5 years, what I am observing in the field is that what the earlier situation before the introduction of the Ganika Kalika Andolana, it was quite different now what we are seeing in the field, because the teachers and the children are benefited with the Ganika Kalika Andolana kit, and they are extensively using in the schools, and also the parents are also interested in using the Kanika Andolana kit also. And also at the same time, in the district, almost 25,000 children are covering this, are using this kit, these kits. Apart from this usage, what we observed is that so many basic concepts are where they are coming to know how they are supposed to inculcate those concepts in the children by using this Ganika Kalika Andolana kit. Moreover, what we are seeing in the sharing meeting, in the cluster sharing meeting among the cluster resource persons and district resource group, the sharing is one point, and it is focusing mainly on the usage of Ganita Kalika Andolana kit and benefit of this kit for the kids. And moreover, at this time, at this point of discussion, I would like to say that it is very much focused on the the things that are put in the NEP, that is numeral literacy and fundamental literacy, and it will be more benefited for the children using these kits. And moreover, the movement what the Ganika Kalika Andolana kit, which was started in the last 5 years, using 1369 slogan, I think so, which made the environment for the learning of the mathematics, that is basic mathematics, among the children by the teachers, by having from the Akshara Foundation. And most appreciable thing is that stakeholders are that is parents. They are responsible and they are participated in the Gram Panchayat event, and they are much exposed in the event also. That is most appreciable thing. And thing is that the app, that building block app, which contains almost 17 concepts of class 1 to 5th, that is great, having 270 games, which is most and most beneficial for the children. And recently, the teaching videos which were given by the Akshara Foundation are helpful for the teachers and for the virtual learning also. With this Kalka Andolana kit, somewhere we made some podcast for the participant honoring to the achievers also. With these aspects, one platform is there, that is another Diksha platform. We are having the Akshara Foundation platform, and these things are more benefited for the children.
Can you close quickly, sir? We are running out of time.
Definitely, sir. I will finish the last word, sir. And with this, I thank all the dignitaries and the members of the foundation. In future also, you please make all the benefit for the children in the benefit of the nation, that is to get out the best civilians, that is best productive individual for the nation. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Prasad. Andy, there is a question for you that I will call out. I think Paul has just left us.
I'm here.
So, Andy, the question comes from Vijay Vemalapalli, who was there on the previous panel. He says, so based on the results presented, would a longer intervention make a difference?
The quick answer is we don't know. What we clearly know is that after 13 months of the intervention running, we see the results that we just reported. Now, if you did more of that, we don't know. We cannot dream away, project that, and we did not observe. So all we presented here is clearly the data that we have, all the rich data of thousands of students and hundreds of classroom observations, and all the rich data, and we want to present it as that after 13 months of observing the observation that was actually implemented as intended. But we cannot make any projections as to what would happen if you ran this for another 2 months or for another 4 months or for another year.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Andy. Ramakrishna Oren, will you speak now? Mute nalli idare. Mute button. Sushmita, yeah.
Okay, madam. Sir, namaskara, sir. Ellarigu namaskara.
One ನಿಮಿಷ. If you speak slowly, Sindhu ಅವರು translate ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Sir, ನಾನು ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ರಾಜ್ಯದ ಗದಗ ಜಿಲ್ಲೆಯ ಮುಂಡ್ರಿ ತಾಲೂಕಿನಲ್ಲಿ BO ಆಗಿ ಕಾರ್ಯ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇನೆ. ತಾಲೂಕಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಸುಮಾರು 8 ವರ್ಷಗಳ ಹಿಂದೆ ಅಕ್ಷರ ಫೌಂಡೇಶನ್ ವತಿಯಿಂದ ಆರಂಭವಾಗಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಗಣಿತ ಕಲಿಕಾ ಆಂದೋಲನ ಇದಿರುವರೆಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಬಹಳ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಮುಂದುವರಿಸಿಕೊಂಡು ಬಂದಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಆ ನಿಟ್ಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ನಾ ಗಣಿತ ಕಲಿಕಾ ಆಂದೋಲನ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನ ತರಗತಿ ಕೊಠಡಿಯನ್ನ ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವ್ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಕೆಲವೊಂದಿಷ್ಟು ಅಂಶಗಳನ್ನ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಗಮನಿಸಿದ್ದೇನೆ. ಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗಿ ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಚಟುವಟಿಕೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಿದಾಗ ಗಣಿತವನ್ನು ಮೊದಲು ಏನು ಗಣಿತವನ್ನು ಕಲೀಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಅವರಲ್ಲಿ ಹೆದರಿಕೆ ಇತ್ತೋ ಆ ಹೆದರಿಕೆ ಈಗ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಎರಡನೇದಾಗಿ
ಒಂದು ನಿಮಿಷ ವೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ, ಅವ್ರು ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಲೇಟ್
Hello, I'll be translating what he just spoke. He's been working with children on math education from the past 8 years, and with Ganita Kalika Andolan, the few things that he has observed, he's going to list them now. Sir, continue, Madi.
Oh, we lost him.
Yeah, he's just coming back in.
Network issues. Okay. ಹೇಳಿ ಸ್ವಾಮಿ. ರಾಮಕೃಷ್ಣ ಅವರು.
ಟೆಕ್ನಿಕಲ್ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಆಗಿದೆ ಸರ್. ಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗಿ ನಾನು ನೋಡಿರುವಂತೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಬ್ಲಾಕ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಬಹುಶಃ ಗಣಿತ ಕಲಿಕೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಚಟುವಟಿಕೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ತೊಡಗಿಸಿಕೊಂಡಾಗ ಮೊದಲೇನಿತ್ತು ಹೆದರಿಕೆ, ಆ ಹೆದರಿಕೆ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಎರಡನೇದಾಗಿ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಈ ಎಲ್ಲಾ ಬೋಧನೋಪಕರಣಗಳನ್ನ ಬಳಸಿ ಅನುಭವಾತ್ಮಕವಾದಂತಹ ಕಲಿಕೆ ಮಕ್ಕಳಲ್ಲಿ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇರುವಂತದ್ದನ್ನ ನಾನು ಕಂಡುಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಇನ್ನು ಮೂರನೇದಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಆ ವಸ್ತುಗಳನ್ನ ನೋಡಿ ಚಟುವಟಿಕೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸ್ತಾ ತಾರ್ಕಿಕವಾಗಿ ಆಲೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭಿಸಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ನಾನು ಗಮನಿಸಿದ್ದೇನೆ. ಇನ್ನು ನಾಲ್ಕನೇದಾಗಿ ನೋಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಗಣಿತವನ್ನ ಅರ್ಥಪೂರ್ಣವಾಗಿ ಕಲಿತು ತರಗತಿ ಕೊಠಡಿಯಲ್ಲಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಜ್ಞಾನವನ್ನ ಹೊರ ಜಗತ್ತಿಗೆ ಸಂಬಂಧೀಕರಿಸಿಕೊಳ್ಳಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಅವಕಾಶಗಳು ಇರುವುದನ್ನ ನಾನು ಕಂಡುಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಇನ್ನು ಕೊನೆಯದಾಗಿ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಗುಂಪಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಸಹಕಾರದಿಂದ ಪರಸ್ಪರ ಚರ್ಚಿಸ್ತಾ ಕಲಿತಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಅಂಶವನ್ನ ನಾನು ಗಮನಿಸಿದ್ದೀನಿ ಸರ್. ಮತ್ತೆ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ
ಸರ್ ಒಂದ್ ನಿಮಿಷ ನಾನು ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಲೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಸೊ ಮಿಸ್ಟರ್ ರಾಮಕೃಷ್ಣ listed out 5 points. The first thing is that activity-based learning is always helpful in a classroom situation. And the second thing that he listed down was the math kit helped in experiential learning for children. And the third point that he listed was it encouraged peer learning among kids. And the fourth point that he mentioned was this helped in students coming outside and learning how the actual world works. ಸರ್ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ನಾನು ಮರ್ತೆ, ಯಾವ್ದಾದ್ರು ಬಿಟ್ಟು ನಾನು
ಇಲ್ಲ ಮೇಡಮ್. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು. ಆಲ್ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ಸ್ ಕವರ್ಡ್. ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಗಣಿತ ಕಲಿಕಾ ಆಂದೋಲನ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದಲ್ಲಿ ಕನ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಟಿವಿಸಂ ಮೆಥಡ್ ಅನ್ನ ಅಳವಡಿಸಲಾಗಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಆ ಕಲಿಕೋಪಕರಣಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಚಟುವಟಿಕೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಿ ಎಂಗೇಜ್ ಆಗ್ತಾರೆ, ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ಲೋರ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾರೆ, ಮತ್ತೆ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ರೆಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ, ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ, ಇವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂಯೇಷನ್ ದಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ಸ್ವ ಮೌಲ್ಯಮಾಪನವನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ಕೋತಾರೆ. ಸೊ ಒಟ್ಟಾರೆ ಬಹಳ 100% ಆಗಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಕನ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಟಿವಿಸಂ ಮೆಥಡ್ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದಲ್ಲಿ ಅನುಷ್ಠಾನಗೊಳ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. ಸೊ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದ ಒಂದು ಮೌಲ್ಯಮಾಪನವನ್ನು ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಿಸಿ ಅನ್ನ ಅನುಷ್ಠಾನ ಮಾಡಲಾಗಿದೆ, ಕಂಟಿನ್ಯೂಯಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಕಾಂಪ್ರಿಹೆನ್ಸಿವ್ ಇವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂಯೇಷನ್. ಒಂದು ತರಗತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಶಿಕ್ಷಕರು ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಚಟುವಟಿಕೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ತೊಡಗಿದಾಗ ಶಿಕ್ಷಕರು ಸ್ವಮೌಲ್ಯಮಾಪನ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋತಾರೆ. ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ನನ್ನ ತರಗತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ 40 ಜನ ಮಕ್ಕಳಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಜನ ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಆಸಕ್ತಿಯಿಂದ ಚಟುವಟಿಕೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಿ ಆ ಕಾನ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ಅನ್ನ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರು, ಎಷ್ಟು ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ನಾನು ಫೀಡ್ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ ಕೊಡ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದನ್ನ ಶಿಕ್ಷಕರು ಸ್ವಮೌಲ್ಯಮಾಪನ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿಕ್ಕೆ ಬಹಳ ಉತ್ತಮವಾದಂತ ಒಂದು ಮೆಥಡ್ ಇದು ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. ಸೊ ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಕೂಡ ಸ್ವಮೌಲ್ಯಮಾಪನವನ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋತಾರೆ ಮೇಡಮ್. ಇದಾದ ನಂತರ ನಾವು ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕಂದ್ರೆ ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಗಣಿತ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಪಠ್ಯಪುಸ್ತಕ ತಗೋತೀವಿ. ಓಕೆ ಮೇಡಮ್. ಪಠ್ಯಪುಸ್ತಕವನ್ನು ತಗೊಂಡು ಒಂದು ಉದಾಹರಣೆ ಅಥವಾ ಒಂದು ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಯನ್ನ ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ನೀಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಆ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಯನ್ನ ಬಿಡಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಬರ್ತಾರೆ. ಅದಾದ ನಂತರ ಶಿಕ್ಷಕರು ಚೆಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ, ಚೆಕ್ ಮಾಡಿ ತಪ್ಪಿದಲ್ಲಿ ತಿದ್ತಾರೆ. ಈ ವಿಧಾನ ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ಸನ್ನಿವೇಶಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ತಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದು. ಬಟ್ ಇಲ್ಲಿರುವಂತ ವಿಧಾನ 3 ಹಂತಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಅರ್ಥಪೂರ್ಣವಾಗಿ ಕಲಿತಾರೆ. ಏನಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಮೂರ್ತ ರೂಪದ ಕಲಿಕೆ, ಪ್ರಾತಿನಿಧ್ಯಾತ್ಮಕವಾದಂತಹ ಕಲಿಕೆ, ಅದಾದ ನಂತರ ಅಮೂರ್ತ ರೂಪದ ಕಲಿಕೆ ಅಂತ 3 ಹಂತಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಮಗು ಕಲಿತಾ ಇರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಕಲಿಕೆ ಬಹಳ ದೃಢೀಕರಣದೊಂದಿಗೆ ಸಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಮೂರ್ತ ಕಲ್ಪನೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ತಾನು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಕಲಿಕೋಪಕರಣಗಳನ್ನು ಬಳಸಿಕೊಂಡು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ತಾನೇ ಸ್ವತಃ ಮಾಡಿ ಅರ್ಥಪೂರ್ಣವಾಗಿ ಪ್ರಕ್ರಿಯೆಯನ್ನ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾನೆ. ಎರಡನೇದಾಗಿ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡ ಪರಿಕಲ್ಪನೆಯನ್ನ ಅವನು ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ನೋಟ್ ಪುಸ್ತಕದಲ್ಲಿ, ಚೌಕಳಿ ಪುಸ್ತಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರತಿನಿಧಿಸ್ತಾನೆ. ಅದಾದ ನಂತರ ಅಮೂರ್ತ ರೂಪದ ಕಲಿಕೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಪಠ್ಯಪುಸ್ತಕದ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳನ್ನ ಅಥವಾ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳನ್ನ ಚಿಹ್ನೆಗಳನ್ನ ಬಳಸಿ ಮಗು ಬಿಡಿಸ್ತಾನೆ ಅನ್ನುವಂಥದ್ದು. ಓಕೆ ಸರ್.
ಓಕೆ ಪ್ಲೀಸ್. ಯಾ
ಓಕೆ. ಸೊ
ಆದ್ದರಿಂದ ಮಗುವಿಗೆ ಕಲಿಕೆ ದೃಢೀಕರಣ ಅನ್ನುವಂಥದ್ದು. ಸರ್ ಹೇಳಿ ಸರ್.
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು. ಓಕೆ ಸರ್. ಸಿಂಧು ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಲೇಟ್.
Yeah, so 5E, explore, engage, all these, the 5 E's and the CCE based learning has enabled students and teachers to do self-evaluation. And also because of the math kit, the abstract concept learning through concrete and representational method has helped students and teachers a lot.
Okay, thank you so much, Sindhu. Andy, there's one other question. Thank you, Ramkrishna. Andy, there's a question for you. It says, was there any other intervention which had positive impact on learning math anywhere in the world?
Yes, and I think it is, of course, this openness to asking yourself that question and putting evidence behind that. And I think India is a story in case. We just heard about that before, that, for example, Pratham has a long-standing relationship with JPAL, the research think tank that we've been working here with, evaluating its programs. And out of that came teaching at the right level, and this teaching at the right level is actually currently being promoted, not only in India, but also in other countries. I mean, before I stop here, I wanted to make one additional footnote here. Even teaching at the right level, and even Pratham, was a long journey, and it did not stop with just one study where there was a magic bullet solution that has been then scaled. I wanted to highlight here that it is perfectly normal to find not the result that you want to find, but then it's just as important to not try to explain those findings away, but really ask yourself, how can we improve upon that, and how can we react to that data? And that's actually also what happened in the case of Pratham, where not every single study found the positive results that everyone would have wished for, and then it was this iterative process, and there was multiple studies going on after each other.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andy. That was useful. Our last viewpoint, at the PDO level. So we've gone from the district to the block. We will now go to the Gram Panchayat, and we have Srimati Rama to talk about her experience at the Gram Panchayat level. Srimati Rama Aure, sorry.
She's not here, Ashok. I think they were having connectivity issues.
Connectivity issues? Okay. All right, so that's a little work for our tech people. You see, the connectivity in the rural parts is not so easy.
Sir, come on, sir. This is the research.
ಸರ್ ನಂದೊಂದು ಸಜೆಷನ್ ಏನಿದೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಸರ್ ಇದು ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ಆಸಕ್ತಿಯುತವಾದಂತಹ ಪರಿಣಾಮಕಾರಿಯಾದಂತಹ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಆಗಿರುವುದರಿಂದ 4-5ನೇ ತರಗತಿಗೆ ಮಾತ್ರ ಇರದೆ 6-7-8ನೇ ತರಗತಿಗೆ ಇದನ್ನ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟೆಂಡ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನುವಂಥದ್ದು ನಂದೊಂದು ಭಾವನೆ. ಸೊ ಆ ನಿಟ್ಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನಿಸೋಣ ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಮಾತನ್ನು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಅಕ್ಷರ ಫೌಂಡೇಶನ್, ನಮ್ಮ ಅಧಿಕಾರಿಗಳಿಂದ, ಸಂಘಟನಾಕಾರರಿಗೂ ಸರ್ವರಿಗೂ ಹೃತ್ಪೂರ್ವಕ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳನ್ನು ಅರ್ಪಿಸ್ತಾ ನನ್ನ ಮಾತುಗಳನ್ನು ಮುಗಿಸ್ತೇನೆ.
Thank you so much.
Sir, I've got two words, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, actually, one national team has visited our Vasdurga Gram Panchayat Malapnalli, sir, where we have got length discussion with the parents and the public stakeholders also, and Panchayat PDO also. There, one suggestion what I have given is that, sir, by giving the modules and all those things, it is not sufficient. We can have some blended module for the class standards 6th, 8th, 7th, and 8th, all those things, sir. Because otherwise, if you go on giving the things, they will become habitual using the kits and all those things. Okay. That should not be the scenario, because teacher is the ultimate, that one who thinks the concepts, and he delivers the concepts in the classroom by making his own TLM. In that scenario, the blended model has to be generated at the foundation level, sir. That is my thinking. So thank you very much, sir.
Actually, in the new video releases, we have some sections where you do it yourself.
Yeah, that is the right thing, sir. And one more thing, sir. What the Andy sir and other things, they have studied the research, done research, where the district Tumkur and Vijaypur they have covered. But if they could have conducted in Chittorgarh district, that will be the different scenario, because extensively we have done the work. That has to come out.
That is a research methodology is different. So
yeah.
Long topic, we will discuss it separately.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
I think we are very much over time, and we need to close this. So, Nagaraj, can I request you to propose and thank everybody for their participation?
Thank you, Ashok. So, yeah, I think it has been a really wonderful, more than 2 hours we have been actually listening to all the experts. So let me take this opportunity to thank everyone who made this event possible today. Firstly, a big thank you to our sponsors, Morris Garage, MG Motors. We really appreciate your support. Thank you, Shri Vijay Bhaskar sir, Chief Secretary of Karnataka Government, so for your presence and very insightful information that you have presented. So we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. Thank you, Shri. Anil, Swarup, sir, retired IAS officer, founder, chairman of Nexus of Good. Thanks for a very spirited, brief but excellent talk by you. Appreciate you also taking time out of your busy schedule. Thank you to all the trustees of Akshara Foundation for making time for this webinar and your continued support in Akshara's endeavors. A big thank you to all our first panel members for joining us and sharing their thoughts. Thank you, Shankar Maruwada of EkStep, Sanjay Malhotra of Nasscom, and Namita Dalmia of Omidyar Network India. Thanks, Ashok, for moderating this particular panel discussion. Thank you for all the Indian diaspora panelists. Thanks for getting up early for this particular webinar. Thank you, Vasu from Houston, Chaya Rao from North Carolina, and Vijay from Vibha in the US. Thanks, Nish, for moderating this panel discussion. Appreciate all of your time. Thank you, Andy and Paul from JPAL for your observation on GKA in the 2 districts. Really appreciate your time and effort in putting together this particular presentation. Lastly, but a big thank you to SKB Prasad sir, DDPI Chitradurga, Ramakrishna Sadalgi sir, BEO Mundargi, and Srimati Rama Madam PDO from Raichur. Thank you all for making this time to be part of this particular webinar. Thank you everyone at Akshara for your efforts in making this a smooth and successful webinar. Of course, there's no particular order to thank you all. Thanks, Anu, Asha, Sushmita, Sindhu, Vaijayanti, Lakshmi. Thank you all. Thank you, Soumya, Prema, Shrikant, and all the field members, especially Angelina, Hanumantra Ikanni, Ranganath, and Shankar Narayana. Thanks to everyone who participated. Some of you have woken up early, some of you are still on it. Hundreds of participants on YouTube as well. We wish you all a very happy 2021. All the very best. Let it all add up in 2021. Cheers. Namaskara.
Thank you for inviting MG on this coveted occasion. MG is a pretty young company. We are just 3 years old. And when we decided to come to India, that point of time, the whole thing was how we are going to disrupt the things, how we are going to do the things in a different way. And then how do we really take care of all the stakeholders? So as part of our brand building, we realized that community is a very important part of stakeholders, and community needs to be included as stakeholder. So even before we launched the car, MG Hector, the first car, much before that we started talking about what can we do in the nearby communities where we operate. So we have two big places. One is in Gurgaon, where our head office is, and second is in Baroda, Halol, where our plant is. So we started working and with some NGOs and some organizations, and we took the cause of women empowerment, girl child education, and lots of other initiatives in that area. I'm happy to say that we have helped more than 60,000 girls in their education already. Part of our card revenue goes into their education, and we have been able to generate a good amount of money for that cause, and we are doing more and more. So in that respect, when we got this opportunity to associate with Akshara to further this cause, we thought it's a great platform to be associated with, because we have some common value system. So once again, thank you very much. We are happy to be part of this initiative, and wish this event a great success.
We can leave now.